Welcome back to another episode of the Darkness Prevails podcast, the global campfire, where real people like you share their true stories of horror, the unexplained, and the supernatural. What have you experienced? Today I've got 15 allegedly true stories for you, 10 of which are sightings of Skinwalkers, the Native American witch who dons the skin of animals, to multiply its creepy factor by at least 5. Then 5 more stories of the straight-up ridiculously horrifying things that go on in the woods. Maybe it's time to just stay out of there. Stay on the couch, eat a cookie, watch reruns of SpongeBob. Anyway, before you enjoy these scary stories, remember to share your story for a chance to have it on the show. Just go to darknessprevails.org. Also, follow or subscribe so you never miss another story, no matter what platform you're on. And if you're on iTunes, please take a moment before or after the show to leave an honest review. We're up to 318 reviews, so let's get that to 400. Thank you. Now, let's dive right in. Backpacking Trip and Possible Skinwalker by Cole D. A couple of years back, I went on a camping trip and a summer camp excursion. This excursion happened to be a backpacking trip around the Mount Hood area, the Timberline area to be specific. The first night wasn't so bad, but in the middle of night, I heard some noises that I prayed were just coyotes or deer. But what came after that made little sense to me and to the others I was camping with. You see, one of the people I was bunking with told me that in the middle of the night, I woke up, walked right outside, and made my way into the forest until I finally laid down near a creek bed. Horrified, I explained to them why this scared me. I've never been a sleepwalker. Never have, not once in my life. I'm not sure they believed me. But worse was soon to come. The following day, one of the other campers sprained or broke something around his wrist, and we had no first aid or communication with the outside world, so we had to improvise and make a makeshift cast to support his arm until we could get him professional help. So after tending to him, we didn't have much daylight left, so we set up camp by the river where the camper hurt himself. Later that night, I was in and out of sleep, near the campfire that we had going. At one point, when I was dozing off again, I began hearing twigs snapping in the distance and leaves shifting, those sounds drawing closer to where our camp was. Then, when they were right next to the tree line, I heard a voice that sounded close to one of the male counselors we were working with. It spoke in an odd way, as if the person asking the question didn't care at all for an answer. "You all right?" Something told me not to move or get up or answer this voice. Despite not hearing any more movement, when the voice came again, it had closed half the distance between us, now sounding like it was right next to me. "You all right?" I was beginning to shake. I was so scared. I knew the counselor who had this voice, and something deep down told me this was not that person. I did not reply to it, and in moments, I heard what sounded like an animal scuttering away through the underbrush. Then the counselor who I thought it was came walking back into the campsite in the opposite side where that thing had came in. He went to take a bathroom break and had rushed back because he was checking on all the campers, making sure we were all here, safe and asleep. When morning came, and believe me, it couldn't come soon enough, we began our final trek to the pickup area to get back to the main camp, which was 2 hours away. As for me, I couldn't feel more on edge. I felt like everyone was looking at me, giving me strange glances. They could probably tell just how scared I was. We finally made it back to the pickup zone, and we had to wait a while for the shuttle to pick us up. I had been holding in a much-needed bathroom break myself, due to fear, but I just could not hold it in anymore. I walked into the nearby woods to relieve myself. I wasn't even that far from the tree line. Out of nowhere, I heard something more disturbing, because the voice I heard this time around was my own voice. "We're here." It only took me 1 second to start running right out of those woods into the panicked stares of my counselors and campmates. One of the counselors asked what was wrong, but I interrupted them, asking how long the shuttle was going to be before it arrived. Soon it came up. We got in and left that place, and ever since I haven't heard anything like those voices. When we did make it back to the main camp, I talked to one of the other campers about what had happened. He laughed and said, "Must have been a skinwalker." Never again will I go into the forest on a camping trip without something to protect myself, and I won't go anywhere in those woods alone. That was too close for comfort, because at one point that thing was inches from me. The Skinwalker at My Doorstep by Allison. I am 17 years old, and during the time I've been alive, I've never experienced anything as horrifying as this. It happened about a month ago as of writing this. My mom was in India, and my dad was out on a business trip. I was given the responsibility to take care of my little brother. It was around 10 o'clock p.m. that night. My brother was in the middle of a gaming session, while I was struggling with writer's block. Just when I had a new, good idea for the romance story I was writing, I heard a knock at the door. My brother and I exchanged looks. We weren't expecting anyone. We wondered who it could be at this hour. We waited a couple of minutes, hoping that whoever it was would give up and go away. But another knock didn't come. Instead, what came was our mother's voice.
"Allie, open the door, it's Mommy."
Our mom? How did she even get here? She had been dropped off at the airport by my dad a few weeks ago. I knew then that something was wrong, no matter how it sounded. If this person really was our mom, she would have entered through the garage entrance like she always did. She knows the garage PIN number. So why she was knocking on our front door, I don't know. "Jason, go upstairs," I told my brother in a low voice. He hesitated as he looked in the direction of the door. "Why? Mom's home," he asked, confused. He began to appear frightened. I knew that wasn't Mom, but I didn't want to scare my 8-year-old brother. Just when I was about to answer him, the knocks we heard before became bangs on the door. They were loud and persistent now.
"Allie, JJ, I know you two are in there,"
the voice said almost tauntingly. My heart sank, knowing that I'll have to be face to face with this person or something sooner or later. "Just go to bed, JJ." I tried to stay unfazed by the continual pounding on the door. Jason hesitated for a moment before making his way upstairs. I sat there in my chair, completely paralyzed in fear. "Open it, open it, open it." The thing on the other side of the door howled. Whatever it was no longer trying to disguise itself as my mother. It sent goosebumps up my spine. I suddenly stood up, angry that whatever that was mimicking my mom. I don't like being tricked. Without completely realizing it myself, I marched toward the door and abruptly stopped in my tracks. Whoever was at the door was not human, not even the slightest. This creature had the blackest eyes. It was lanky, with ribs sticking out of its skin. It was so pale and impossibly tall. Just looking at it, it made me want to vomit. I don't know what got into me, but I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Get out of here! I'm not letting you in!" After that, it felt hard to breathe, and I could see its black eyes on me. I shivered in fear as the thing let out an ear-piercing scream before disappearing into the dark. After that incident, I ran upstairs and held Jason close, hoping that it didn't come back, hoping that my real mother would be home very soon. Until she did get back home, I was afraid that that thing had gotten her, that the way its powers worked was that it took my mother and stole her voice. I'm glad I was wrong. A while after that, I found myself searching on Google for what this could possibly be, and one all-too-close match was an entity called the Skinwalker, something that has the ability to disguise its physical appearance and voice as other animals, even other people. I still am not over this incident. I don't think I ever could be. I don't think this is something any sane human can forget about. Skinwalker on Eagle Mountain by Sistel. This happened a few years ago, but thank God it only happened once. My sister went on a walk around 10 at night. Her name is Rosalie. It was a sort of cloudy and cold night. The moon was out and it gave off a little light, but she could still see well. I wasn't with her that night. I was safe at home watching a movie. When she was near the town park, she noticed a silhouette nearby that appeared to be following her. When she passed a streetlight, the person passed by it eventually as well. But when she caught sight of the thing's shadow, she knew it was no person at all, while the silhouette remained the same. The shadow itself was an amalgamation of dozens of different animals, writhing and curling in on itself, as if they were tied or fused together. Her eyes widened. She said she began to question her reality, so she calmly tried to walk away as it came a little closer. She turned around and began to speed walk now, barely able to contain herself. She was so close to her house, but a little too far. Taking a few looks back, she saw that it didn't approach any further, as if the thing had lost interest in her as she sped up. When she arrived home, though, she felt shaken up, nervous, and altogether terrified. My other sister asked her what was wrong, and she explained the whole incident. Even though I was 9 years old at the time, gullible of course, I still believe her story to this day. I remember the look on her face. I remember thinking it looked so real, so visceral. Her expression said to me that what she saw out there was real, and that has scared me more than anything. Pig-Faced Skinwalker by Elijah D. To begin, I'm one of those people who, when startled enough, I might just throw a fist. Anyway, I'm 15 and was at the trailer alone one day. I had just come in from outside because I'd gotten a weird feeling and I didn't want to stay outside much longer that day. I did forget to lock the door behind me though. I was watching some videos online in the living room when I heard this clomping sound. Not like feet or boots or shoes. It sounded more like hooves, like a horse. And strangely enough, I heard them echoing down the hallway. Then they suddenly stopped. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I turned around slowly, expecting to see something straight from my nightmares, but as the hallway entrance came into view, I didn't see anything. Relieved, I just assumed something was wrong with my earbuds. Maybe they had been popping weirdly or something. But just as I thought nothing was wrong, I could see something out of the corner of my left eye. There was something moving around. I was not alone in this trailer anymore. I remember feeling so horrified. It was like something was pulling my soul out of me. When I managed to turn my head around, I saw a blur of movement. I was too petrified to move much more than that, and my eyes were watering. Suddenly, the lights flickered out, and my phone suddenly turned off. Everything went quiet. I forced myself to get up and move. I looked around, but could see nothing through the pitch darkness. I got up and followed the wall with my hands until I managed to make my way over to the window to lift the curtain to get light inside. As I was about to lift it, I felt something breathing on the side of my face. It was the most awful smell, worse than decomposing animal. I gripped the string, then something scared me even more. I heard my name whispered through the darkness. Like I said before, as it was common for me to do, I involuntarily swung my arm out. I made contact with something I didn't expect. Fur, and underneath that, extremely hard and muscular flesh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to crawl out of the window or jump out. I began clawing and yanking at the drawstring and the curtain itself, causing light from outside to leak into the trailer, revealing to me my attacker. The figure almost appeared human for a moment, but then I got a better look at it. The creature was tall, and it was hunched over. Its legs and arms were very skinny and long. Its hands were claws, and they appeared more like an owl's. There were patches of fur and random spots on its body, but its face was like a pig's, but not at all symmetrical like a natural creature. It was uneven, with sharp teeth jutting out all over its mouth. I saw amber glowing eyes staring at me, and I swear, in that moment I saw it smile. The creature knelt down before me in an entirely unnatural way. Its whole body shifted left and right in order to kneel, as if it had to break parts of itself inside just to be able to move into that position. The smile turned into an open mouth, as if it was about to take a large bite out of my face. I brought my arms up, trying to cover myself, accidentally making contact with the creature. With a scream that sounded like ages of torment, the creature then went silent and still. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. I ran for the lights and turned them off since they had been on, and when I flicked them on again, the lights were working. Then I ran to the bathroom and locked myself inside. I peered hesitantly through the bathroom window to see a figure walking into the woods. Before disappearing entirely, it stopped and looked over its pointed, jagged shoulder, and I saw that smile again. Then it crouched down like before, and a mass of oozing, flopping flesh flew off of it, and before I knew it, there was nothing more than a rabbit that quickly disappeared into the forest. I never stayed in the trailer alone again, afraid that the thing would come back. Nor have I gone into the woods alone at all, a topic that once fascinated me to no end. Skinwalkers are nothing more than a thing of my nightmares, and I will do anything to keep as far away from them as I can. The Thing by Donnie. This is one of many eerie things that I've had happen to me over the years. I'm Native American and enjoy things like target practice, fishing, hunting since a young age. This happened when I was 12. My brother and his girlfriend, along with my friend John, all went out camping together out in the desert one weekend. We joked around until about 9 at night, when all of us kind of just got quiet. We were beginning to feel watched, like someone in the distance was watching us very close. I know it's a cliched feeling to talk about, but when everyone you're with suddenly feels the same way, it's something you just can't ignore. And as a Native American, I believe in what my culture has told me, and with so many spirits and monsters in our folklore, it can get you feeling pretty paranoid. To make me feel a bit safer, I grabbed my Ruger 556 from the tent, and my brother and John did the same with their weapons. About an hour later, his girlfriend had to go to the bathroom, so she got up and went about 75 feet from the campsite. Keep in mind, we were in northwestern New Mexico, and there's tons of hills there, mesas and canyons too. She said she saw something she described as, bizarrely, a half-man, half-coyote sitting on top of the hill, just watching her. So me, John, and my brother walked to where she said she saw it, and the creature was still there. Except now it wasn't sitting like she had described it. We were watching something that looked almost like a coyote, standing on two legs, trying to mimic a person. After a while, it got back down on all fours and ran. Curious and perplexed, we followed it to a nearby canyon, where we soon lost sight of it. It was then, not knowing where it was, that we grew terrified. My brother and I knew what it could have been, but John, being of Mexican descent, wasn't sure. As we returned back to camp, all sets of our eyes glancing over our shoulders almost constantly, we explained to John and my brother's girlfriend what we believed it was. Of course, that would be a skinwalker. That night at the campsite, 2 of us stayed on guard at all times while the others slept. The next morning, bright and early, we packed up and were ready to go. But I wanted to stop by where we saw that thing the first time, just to check something. Unfortunately, somehow that creature didn't leave any footprints, even though mere meters from where I was standing looking at the lack of footprints, I could see all of ours from last night. My Recent Encounter by L816. I'm 17 years old, and it was last month on the 30th, just 8 days after my grandmother passed away. I needed to go out into the woods to get some fresh air, specifically to a spot that I often walk to for some alone time and to smoke a little bit. I soon made it to the spot with my rifle by my left side. I pulled out my pipe, lighter, and my weed. I was about to load the bowl of the pipe when I suddenly heard something that weirded me right out. It was my grandmother's voice, and it was coming from behind me. I turned around quickly, putting my contraband up, thinking it was a game warden trying to catch some poachers, maybe even teasing me by mimicking an old lady's voice. But to my surprise, there she was, just standing there, staring at me, my mouth hung open. Who are you?" I asked. She responded in my grandma's voice. "It's me, your grandma. Don't you recognize me?" I leapt for my rifle and chambered around. I said to it, "My grandma isn't alive anymore." Then she smiled, revealing angular and sharp teeth and a mouth that nearly stretched from end to end up to her scalp. I was sweating, my arms shaking as I aimed the rifle at her. I took a nervous step forward, trying to be as intimidating as possible. The creature that wasn't my grandma took a step back. It happened like this for about a minute. A step forward, a step back, until it began to disappear into the tree line. Before disappearing completely, it said one last thing to me, using a voice that only barely sounded like my grandma anymore.
"I'll see you again, soon."
After it left, I slowly and carefully headed back to my vehicle, trying to maintain my composure so that it didn't sneak up on me in a panic. When I made it back to my truck, I turned and looked at the tree line, and to my horror and disgust, I saw that smile on a face that was beginning to melt away, melting away the bits that looked like grandma. I closed the door of my truck, and I floored it down the dirt road. I think I encountered a skinwalker that day, and had I not been armed, I don't think I'd be around to share a story with anyone. Skinwalker on the dirt road. by Haley Cheyenne 10. I live in a small town in Florida, where there isn't much more to do than riding around on dirt roads. It was around, I want to say, junior year of high school. Me and my old friend A were riding dirt roads one night. We were out late, maybe 1 or 2 a.m., because like I said, there's not much to do around here. We were coming around this corner on the road, and in my headlights, I saw someone standing in the ditch. Without thinking, I immediately put on the brakes and stopped my car. The person began to walk out into the middle of the road. Me and Day are staring at them, perplexed. Why was someone out here so late, just wandering around on some random back roads? Then suddenly, something happened that made the two of us breathe in sharply together. We saw that this person was 7 feet tall, and they were no person, because people don't have legs that look like a goat's. And the way its legs that were goat-like had no fur on them, just pale grayish-white skin, it was disgusting to me. The creature looked like a malnourished abomination. The way its bones protruded through the skin, it appeared as if it hadn't eaten in ages. It was nearing the edge of the road before it stopped to look directly at us, and in that moment, we made eye contact with it. It had the yellowest eyes you've ever seen. We stared it down as it walked into the woods, and when it finally disappeared out of view, I regained my composure, floored the gas pedal, and we raced home. To this very day, I couldn't tell you what the face looked like. The most I remember are those menacing eyes. It wasn't until last year around Halloween I started watching videos on YouTube, some of the fringe stuff about cryptids and whatnot, and I stumbled upon videos that gave me an idea of what I saw that night. Now, I also have a family member who has Navajo heritage. When we went to visit them, I managed to get her to ask her older family members if what I saw was a skinwalker. Before she finished my story, the man she was talking to asked about the eyes. He asked if they were yellow, and I remember very well that they were. Haunting of the Skinwalker by Keroro-chan. I'll be perfectly honest. This was probably one of the weirdest things to ever happen to me. First of all, let me mention that we got the inspiration to go here because my brother said it was the skulking grounds for a skinwalker. He said that he encountered one here once and had even fired at it, though he claims bullets don't do anything to it. Now I live in a decent-sized town in Ohio. About 20 or 25 minutes away from our house is a stretch of road that's surrounded by woods. There's a few farms around there, but it's really just used for public hunting as it floods horribly sometimes, and the city closes those roads with large metal gates. Alongside this road is a small cemetery called Henline Cemetery. It's a tiny family plot, with the last grave being from the 1850s. The city still does maintain it, and all of the old headstones are gone now. So they, the city, put in one large headstone with all the graves listed there. It was down the path a little ways from this cemetery that my brother first encountered that creature. Anyway, my girlfriend and I were out there hanging around with our friend Jeremy. We had decided to check out this cemetery and walk around for a little bit, seeing if we could creep ourselves out. Michaela, my girlfriend, is a big paranormal fanatic. She loves paranormal stories and the like, and she wants to see this thing my brother saw. But I'm not going to lie, I wanted to see it too, and so did Jeremy. We get to the tiny cemetery, pull off, and start to walk around. I've got anxiety, and it tends to show up at annoying and often random times. And at that moment, I felt like I was being watched. I tried to swallow it down. Again, I knew I had anxiety problems, and maybe I was a bit excited at the time. Now, the path the hunters use here is pretty narrow, so we had to go in a single file line, with me in front, Jeremy in the middle, and Michaela in the back. The walk was pretty uneventful. All we saw was really fresh coyote poop. No big deal. As for coyotes, they usually don't bother you, but it was getting dark, and the path itself was full of holes, roots, and downed limbs, so we decided to just turn it around and go get some supper. After eating, Jeremy decided to go back to Henline. The pull-off is never closed, because the region is for public hunting, so we pulled in and Jeremy gets out. Michaela and I stayed put though. The feeling of that place had completely changed from during the day. It was paralyzing, nauseating even, and I could barely breathe. It was just a feeling of pure evil. Suddenly, we saw Jeremy racing back to the car and jumping inside in a panic. We asked him what was wrong, and he said he felt something pull him into the cemetery. He fought himself away from its grasp and ran back to the car. He didn't have to say much more than that, and I was pulling out and speeding out of there as fast as I could. We're going back eventually, but not at night. Never at night. And we're definitely going to bring some sort of protection with us. I still want to see this thing. I just wonder if it was the creature my brother saw who attacked Jeremy. And I wonder if it grows stronger at night. I wasn't scared, but I am now. By Bearbeard822. I work nights as an Asda colleague. Asda is a member of the Walmart family here in the UK. Just a little background about myself before I get to the main events of that night. I'm 24 years old, living in Manchester in the UK. The job I work requires me to pull heavy pallets of beer, wine, and spirits from the warehouse to the shop floor and stock the shelves. It's certainly not the most glamorous job in the world, but at the very least, it pays the bills. In this job, I'm contracted to work Friday to Sunday. I should also mention I'm going to be joining the RAF soon, and will be using this job to get by while I train so I can pass fitness tests. Anyway, it was time to work my Friday night shift. I was on my way to work, traveling through the old reservoirs not too far from where I live. As I'm riding through this rocky dirt road that cuts through the densely wooded area between the middle of the bodies of water leading to the hill, I'm bracing my already aching legs when I begin to get the feeling that I'm not alone out here, like someone is watching and you have no idea what their intentions really are. I've never been a run like a coward type of guy, so by the time I get through to the other side, I'm really wanting to know why I feel this way and who might be watching me. So I stop at the bottom of the hill, partially to give my poor legs a rest and to see what is watching me. Of course, the entire time I'm still feeling that familiar gaze, the gaze of the unknown, taking in my body at different angles. I park my bike. I walk over to an area where excess water runs off into the other reservoir. As I'm standing there, the sun setting and glistening vibrant red and orange against the water, blinding me for a few seconds while my eyes scan the horizon and opposing tree line. I don't see anything. I must have stood there for maybe 10 minutes, all the while still feeling that feeling. Assuming after this point I'm going crazy and just feeling paranoid for no particular reason, I get back on my bike, and I proceed to agonize my legs and lungs with a 10-minute ride up what felt like a 45-degree angle, until I hit the flat ground at the top, where the road meets a park path to the left. I stop at a nearby bench for another breather. That park is mostly grass. Long and winding paths dot the area. It's a big cut-through to multiple places, hence why I'm using it to get to work. It's 8:30 at that point, and I've got another 45-minute ride ahead of me to get to work. So I've got some time to sit there, reply to a couple of texts, and wait. Then comes that feeling again. It just falls over me like a veil. Behind me, about 50 feet up to the tree line, that's where I feel it coming from. I lit a cigarette and listened for a moment. I wanted to hear something, a noise, anything, because at this point it was making me mad. Whoever or whatever there was out there following me or watching me, they would know they were following the wrong guy. I took that final burning drag that stung my throat, and I was finished with my cigarette. I flicked it away, and I stood up, turning my face to that tree line. I still didn't see anyone, but I could feel someone's eyes boring into the back of my head the moment I turned around. Either to soothe my paranoia or put a stop to this bullcrap, I began to walk over to those trees where I sensed it. I'm about 30 feet away from it, and I could still only see darkness. It's already dark out now, with just the ambient light from the setting sky's twilight, only dimly lighting the darkening park. I continued walking, staring into a bush, when I suddenly got a feeling that I should not be doing this, a feeling of regret that was growing with every step. Hairs on my neck were standing up, same for the hair on my arms and my head. I shook it off. As hard as it was to ignore, I quickened my pace. It was so fast, it happened in the blink of an eye, but at the same time it felt like an hour passed by. About 10 feet from the bush, my ears began to feel pressured, like they do when you're climbing a great altitude. But I was in a park in the middle of Manchester. Then, I watched the bush twitch for a moment. Fear kicked in, and I felt paralyzed. Something inside the bush chirped, then growled, and whatever it was black as night as it came out of the undergrowth. It had something in its dog-like maw. It was 4.5 feet tall, on all fours. Its eyes. Ugh, my goosebumps act up writing this now. I feel like the hairs on my skin want to burst just thinking about it. Its eyes were red, and I don't mean bloodshot. I don't mean glowing from the light of the sky either. I mean they were red, with pinprick small pupils. Its arms were long and veiny, and its legs were massive and powerful from what I saw next. Its head darted up at me. Fight or flight kicked in, and I reached out to punch it right in the snout, but that didn't even seem to faze it. The creature stared and growled as I went to land a kick, and I screamed at the top of my lungs at it. It stood after a good belt to the face from a size 10 boot, and I kid you not, the creature was a foot taller than I was, and I was a little bit over 6 feet. The creature then dropped a gray cat from its mouth as it howled a gross gurgle that I can only assume was a mixture of pain from me hitting it, saliva, and fluids from the poor cat. It darted away from me. I don't freaking know why. It ran in the direction I came from. I felt woozy. I went for my bike. I sat on it for a moment, shaking and staring. It took me a moment to realize that creature had human hands. Needless to say, I wasn't going to be traveling that way for a while, because I don't want that thing to finish what it started. And after that, I rode home, calling in sick for the weekend. If anyone else in the Manchester area has seen something like this, or felt something strange in the woods, let me know, because saying that I saw a skinwalker here in the UK sounds crazy. I Didn't Believe in Monsters by James David Dyer. I never really believed in monsters, but I always enjoyed reading about them. Even a couple of days before my camping trip, I was watching videos on 411 missing people. I guess the unknown and undiscovered really piques my curiosity. This particular experience happened back in 2015, when my two friends Tony and Ryan planned a spur-of-the-moment camping trip with me. We planned for the following weekend as we each had no plans of our own, so it sounded like a fun idea. We headed out late on a Friday evening to a spot a few hours from my house through the canyon and into the mountains. This area of northern Colorado is known for its bears and mountain lions, but we weren't worried. We were 3 big guys and 2 of us were bringing heavy firepower to deter any unwanted guests. We checked out a few locations when we neared the area we wanted to camp. A few spots were a bust with a lot of people out for the weekend. Luckily, though, we found a spot more secluded and set up camp. It was supposed to be nice and sunny out that weekend, and I had planned on jumping in the nearby lake. Rain clouds began to form in the distance, and the weather became cold as night neared. We sat around the campfire, telling jokes, a few ghost stories, really having a blast, despite the weather. As it approached midnight, we called it good and put the fire out. Tony went to his 2-man tent, and I went to the 10-man tent that Ryan had set up. As I crawled into my sleeping bag, I passed out within minutes of my head hitting the pillow. It must have been 3 in the morning when I woke up with the urge to go to the bathroom. I crawled out of my sleeping bag. I found it hard to walk. I was stumbling around like a drunk, not being able to find my balance. I kind of found my composure for a moment and exited the tent. Once I began to move around in the pitch black, my vision began to sharpen a bit. Only it wasn't pitch black. It was more like gray, and my vision had become distorted like a bad television picture. With the strangest sensation, I stumbled forward, managing to alleviate myself against a nearby tree. I headed back to the tent when I was done, with an intense, eerie vibe taking hold of me. I awoke the next morning, not really giving what had happened the previous night much thought. That was until Tony mentioned something around the breakfast campfire. He said the sensation of his balance had been taken from him when he exited his tent a few hours after heading to bed. He said it was the strangest feeling he had ever had. He hadn't drank any alcohol that night. I told him my story, concurring with him, that we both thought nothing of it. Probably just something we ate or just a one-off thing. Then we quickly focused on the day of fishing ahead. After spending the day at the nearby lake, we retired to our camp with our catch and prepared a nice fish fry. We sat around the campfire until close to midnight, then headed off to bed. After a few hours of sleep, I awoke with a sick feeling in my stomach. I was in disbelief that I felt like I wanted to throw up. It made no sense. Why did I feel like this again? I decided to turn over and try to go back to sleep, trying to fight it, but the feeling pestered me until I had to jump up and run out of the tent. Only I couldn't run. I stumbled around again in a peculiar fashion while trying to reach for the zipper on the tent. I fumbled with it, managing to get it open at last, and practically fell out of the tent. I staggered into the dark. I must have only gone 15 feet from it, finding a spot for me to spill my guts on the floor where nobody would see it in the morning. I was growing ever more aware of my surroundings as I kneeled in the dark. In between heaves, I managed to peer around into the darkness, feeling how vulnerable I was all of a sudden. Just then, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned in its direction, thinking I should keep an eye on it in case whatever it was came at me. Coming through the dark was the shape of a man, but I heard no snapping of twigs or branches, and the crunch of the forest floor below was absent. "Hey, James, are you okay?" A whisper called out. My pounding heart finally relaxed a bit at hearing Ryan's voice coming towards me. Thinking that he heard me throwing up and came to check on me, I answered that I'd be fine, and I wasn't sure what had come over me. He crept closer until I noticed he had stopped probably 5 feet from me, and he whispered again, "Why don't you come over here?" I looked up again, after heaving once more, thinking to myself, what does he want? Can't he see I'm sick? Irritated, I shouted at him, "What?" To which he responded, "Why don't you come over here?" Feeling disoriented, with my head pounding, I slowly got to my feet and began to head in his direction. That's when I realized I was heading away from the tent. I stopped and turned around, trying to find the outline of the tent in the dark. I then asked Ryan what was so important that he needed me over there, to which he responded again, "Why don't you come over here?" This better be good, I thought, as I begrudgingly began to head in his direction. I heard another voice call out, "Hey Zach, where are you going?" It was Ryan, except now his voice was coming from behind me, back in the direction which I realized was the tent. Confused, I turned towards the tent, and then back to where I'd just seen Ryan standing. The outline of a man in the dark was gone now. Just trees and forest floors surrounded me. I picked myself up and ran in the direction of the tent, finding that my equilibrium had returned to me. The real Ryan asked me again where I'd been going. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just said I got turned around in the dark for a second. He went back to sleep then, and I laid there, listening in the night, watching for shadows cast upon the thin nylon. I didn't see anything or hear anything else that night. I'm not sure what I encountered in the woods. I don't know if it was a hallucination from being half asleep and half awake, or a skinwalker trying to lure me off deeper into the woods. But what I do know is that if you're camping in the Rockies of northern Colorado, beware of your surroundings and beware of where your friends are. The Man in the Forest by Nino. I was 15 years old at the time. It was in Greece in 2011. My grandfather had recently passed away, so we thought it would be nice to take my grandmother to the place she met my grandfather many years ago. We were all spending a 2-week holiday in the little island of Mykonos. The good thing about this place is that it's mostly little stone and brick homes dotted around the forest landscape, hardly touristy. Anyway, my father and I left the house one afternoon. We walked around the large house and into the forests surrounding the property. We took a day pack with some standard equipment, as well as our phones and a camera, because at the time my father worked as a freelance photographer. We began by leaving the area which surrounded the house we had rented and took off towards the center of the island where the forests were. We had left the house just a few hours after midday as it got quite hot in the middle of the day. By the time it was 6 or 7 p.m., we had made it to the woods, but we knew we had to turn back soon before it got really dark. We set up the camera, took some beautiful photos of the landscape as well as the various wildlife. That's around the time it started to get weird. I followed my dad a little further into the deeper reaches of the forest when we began to hear something strange. We assumed it was one of the larger animals of the forest bunking down for the night, so we pushed on. We came around the corner to a ravine, inside of which was a man. He was weirdly dressed in purple drapes and what seemed to be a turban, like formal religious dress in the middle of a deep and dirty ravine in a forest on a desolate island in Greece. And the man was not alone. He had with him a dirty shovel in one hand and was digging a large hole. And beside him was a figure whose gender and looks I could not discern because of how dark it was getting. The figure was lying on the ground and their face was in the dirt. They were lifeless. My father started to take his camera out from its respective bag. He removed the lens cap slowly and positioned the camera forward toward the figure, hoping to capture a photo of the man in the act. But my dad clicked the shutter button too early, causing an audible snapping sound, yet capturing nothing but the grass below us. The man snapped around, his eyes meeting mine. My father and I took off. We didn't look back at all until we reached the edge of the property. We had no idea how long we had been running by then. We stopped to finally catch our breath and glanced back into the woods. It was pitch black, the sun now completely over the horizon. We shuddered and walked back inside the house. That night we filed a police report. The next morning we were due to leave, and when the sun had risen, we packed up everything and prepared to leave the house. But as we were leaving, we noticed something on the doorstep a dirt-covered shovel. My dad swears we'll never go back until the police are sure they found the man. Be careful telling the forest your every secret. By Weird Ola. There was a strip of forest very close to my home, and sometimes it was the only place I felt comfortable. I was a very shy child, and I did not get along with other children in school. I was extremely reserved. My parents always forced me to mix it up with the other kids and take part in after-school activities, but the only place I ever really wanted to be was the woods. There was something peaceful about that quiet, the only place I wasn't judged or ridiculed. I used to love going out there, walking around, drawing. I knew my way around the forest, as I'd been there so many times before. On a particularly bad day for me, I went out into the woods and didn't feel like drawing or walking around. Instead, I sat in a quiet spot, and I simply talked to myself. Or maybe not to myself, but to the woods. I was a very self-reflective child, and I remember the first time I just sat there, just talking to myself, or no one in particular. To others it must have looked like I was crazy, but I was talking to nature, the trees, and anything and everything around me. It felt good talking that way, and even though I couldn't hear anything reply back to me, it definitely did feel like at the time the forest was listening to me, and I would take the wind blowing through leaves as a reply. That's all I needed. I told it everything I was scared of, worried about, and just how constantly on edge I seemed to be. I was also very scared of the dark as a child, and needed a nightlight to sleep at night. I believed in ghosts and monsters, and even though my parents kept on telling me they didn't exist, deep down I just couldn't believe that yet. As I began expressing myself to the forest, I found myself feeling a little bit weightless, a little bit happier during the day. One afternoon after school, I was in my spot, sitting down, telling the forest my secrets, the usual. But there was something different about those woods that day. For the first time in ever, the wind was gone. The trees seemed calm, and the animals seemed to be in hiding, nothing at all around me making any sort of noise, except for myself. And for the first time, I was beginning to feel unnerved by the place that had made me feel safe. I decided today was a bad day for this. I began to get up, ready to walk home, but inside I felt like I had so much more to say. But now, I felt like I needed to bottle things up again. The next day when I went out there, things changed again. It was just as silent as before, except for the animals, who were more lively, but in a very eerie way. They were acting in a way they had never done before. I saw squirrels, foxes, birds, and even slugs, and every time I noticed an animal, they were motionless and staring in my direction. It was as if they were mocking me. It's quite a disturbing feeling when the cute face of an animal scares you to your core. Even the birds in the trees began flying over me more and more, at several points almost hitting me, and when they sang their songs they seemed to be laughing. This wasn't my forest anymore. Once again, I left for home earlier than usual, the entire way back, reminding myself that this is just nature, and with nature, showing any sign of weakness is a bad idea. Then came the event that kept me out of the woods for good, that turned my refuge into a nightmare. In the middle of the night, I woke up. There was a sound at my window that sounded like tapping. I rubbed my sleepy eyes and sat up. Then I looked toward the window. There I saw antlers. Curious, I walked over and looked outside the window. I was amazed at what I saw. There were deer, rabbits, and birds, all set in different spots in the yard. all of them looking toward my window. I think anyone would feel unnerved at the moment seeing something like this, but I felt more awestruck at first. The moment those creatures saw that they had my attention, they all turned in the direction of the tree line, in the direction of something new and terrifying. There, in the shallow part of the darkness, I saw 2 red eyes. They were massive eyes, angled in a way that made them look furious, daunting, and hungry. They stayed still in that part of the forest as the entire group of animals began to make their way toward the set of eyes, all while looking back at me, mocking me again with their emotionless faces. The moment one of these smaller creatures came within reach of the red-eyed entity, a pale, skin-covered hand reached out, squeezing what appeared to be a rabbit, and pulled it into the darkness with it, up toward where the mouth would be. The eyes closed only for a moment, and when they opened again, the creature dropped something to the ground. Something that was missing pieces. Something that used to be a rabbit. One by one, the animals seemed to line up, allowing themselves to become a meal, a victim for this unseen monster. I was so freaking horrified that I ran back to bed and covered myself with a blanket. There I shook nervously until the sun rose. When I built up my courage, I went outside into the tree line to see if I could find any remains. I went to the exact spot I had seen those eyes. Was it a dream? Was it a nightmare? Had it been my anxiety turning my thoughts into something twisted? I wasn't sure, especially when all I found at the tree line was a broken off antler and a few splatters of red. That couldn't be all that remained of what I saw last night. Or maybe it was a coincidence, and everything else had been a nightmare. Either way, I took this as a warning to not go into those woods anymore. Something was telling me that I did not belong in there, that I was no longer welcome. And deep down, I physically had a sickening sensation, like if I did go back in, then I would become prey. For the remainder of our time living there at that house in the woods, I played inside, finding any and every excuse not to go toward the woods. I know what happened to me may not have been more than a dream, but I'm sure you all would understand. After everything that happened to me, and then having a nightmare like that, I think there's more going on in those woods, and that's why I want to say, be careful telling the forest your deepest fears and secrets, because they are listening, and they will use it against you. Take this story, my most bizarre and disturbing experience, and believe what you will. As for me, I'll stay far away from the trees. The Forest Beside the Beach by Jessica W. I was an overexcited 7-year-old, and thanks to our TV, I'd seen a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have been able to see yet. Gruesome crimes, live births, and things like that. Despite it being fictional on our widescreen LG TV, it was still enough to make me curious and a little bit scared. Now, growing up in a family of 6, 4 of whom are step-siblings, and being in the middle-aged group of them, nobody really cares about me that much. While that does sound depressing, it's true. I could look after myself and choose what's best, and there were times I was completely forgotten about. Luckily, I had a lot of self-esteem and confidence. I was able to stand in front of a crowd and make a fool of myself, and brush it all off with a laugh in the end. But there came a day in my young childhood life when something happened that brought my confidence crashing down. One day, my step-sibling and I ran off into the undergrowth to cool off, to get away from the hot sun on a very warm day. His mother had convinced my father to go to the beach, and by then the sand was absolutely scalding our feet. Luckily, those beaches were surrounded by thick forest, so my step-sibling took me by the hand. We both smiled and dashed forth into the forest, feeling the cool relief of shade on our skin. But we ended up going much further than we were probably allowed. But that's the thing about being forgotten. You end up getting away with things you shouldn't get away with. The forest seemed louder that day. It was the afternoon, and the squeaks and chirps sounded desperate rather than neutral. But maybe it was just me. We were still laughing and joking around by then, until we heard the first growl. I had heard it faintly at first, but ignored it, thinking it was something else, or a trick of the ears. Then came the second growl. I slapped my hand to my step-sibling's mouth, telling him to hush, then slowly removed it. We heard violent cracks and careless footsteps, as if something larger than us did not care if we heard it. Whatever it was seemed confident that it would be getting what it wanted. "We gotta go," I whispered into my step-sibling's ear. He nodded, and we ran, until a soul-shattering screech ripped through the forest, causing the sudden silence to break, sending birds flying and rabbits and raccoons running, paying absolutely no attention to us, rather eager to get away from this thing. We followed our footsteps that we had imprinted into the wet mud. I believe it had rained the previous night, and thank the Lord it had, or else that day would have probably been the end for the two of us. After several minutes, we burst out of the tree line, eyes full of sand. When I turned around, my eyes now watery due to the sand that had collected in them from the wind, I caught sight of something. It was 7 feet tall and almost human-like, except for what looked like wings hanging from its back and the 2 holes in its face. Its nose was not human either, more like a snake's, and apart from that, its face only had a mouth. It had these oversized arms that reached its knees, and the legs itself were fat, yet wobbled under its torso's weight. Its stomach was small yet chubby, and the color of its skin was a sort of whitish-bluish color. Its mouth was twisted into a sharp grin as it raised its large 2-fingered hands, which gave its head a run for its money. The strange thing was, there were no teeth in its mouth. It seemed to wave at us, mimicking a sort of goodbye. I froze. Everything around me seemed to stop, and I did the one thing I should have never done. I waved back at it. Its grin stretched even wider, until the skin seemed to rip at the corners. As I stood motionless, staring, my step-sibling yanked me by the arm and dragged me out of the woods. We had made it out alive, but I had not made it out in one piece, at least not mentally. I was more confused than I'd ever been, more amazed and more horrified too. For a long time that would bring me to the end of my story, but sadly, it did not end back at that beach. I don't know if something is out to get me, or if I have some sort of disability that's causing me to hallucinate that creature, but I've seen it from time to time. It's been decades, but I still see it. I wish I could get help, but I don't know what to tell people. And what if it isn't something that's wrong with my mind? What if it's real? If people do believe me, what would we even do about it? Lost in the Forest by Alex. When this happened to me, I was between 10 and 11 years old. I lived in the countryside, near the mountains in a country in Europe. The village in which I lived was surrounded by other small villages and towns, and from the other side, there were massive forests and mountains. My home, in fact, was on a hill, and north to my house there was my grandma's place, and to the south were woods. It was around autumn time, I think, and back then one of my chores was to go look for mushrooms in the woods, but my parents would never let me go alone. But because I enjoyed doing this, I would sometimes lie if I didn't have anyone to go with me, and my parents would let me go. If they didn't, I would sneak out anyway. Now, I don't remember what exactly I told my parents that day, but they let me go to the woods. I remember looking for the usual path that I took to the forest, but for some reason I thought to myself, why not try a new path? I was soon in the thick of the forests, searching for mushrooms, and despite me taking a new and different path, I knew pretty well where I was. But something in me compelled me to go a little bit further than usual, but not too far, I reminded myself. Otherwise, I might get lost. If I hadn't known these forests so well, I would have probably been lost in the first 5 minutes upon entering. It's easy to get lost in there for someone who hasn't been there at least 100 times before, like myself. Now, I don't know how long I was in there, but I think I was still looking for mushrooms when I heard something that sounded like crashing branches. I was and still am very paranoid, so of course I nearly crapped myself, as it sounded like something heavy was walking around. At this point, I turned around and began to nervously walk back the way I thought I came. But soon, I found myself lost in my own forest. I was pretty mad at myself at first. I didn't understand how in the world I got lost. I grew up here, after all, and I hadn't even gone that far. I was walking past trees, desperate to find a path or something that I could recognize. But of course, I did not. I started crying, still hearing the cracking branches. I tried to convince myself that it was just a deer, but my paranoia continued to rise. At this point, tears streaming down my face, I was praying while searching my way around desperately. I was looking for any kind of landmark I could find that would get me out of here. Then I stopped for a moment. There was a sense of relief flooding over me now. I didn't know why at first. I mean, I was still lost, but something in my head was screaming at me to turn around, and I listened. And what I'm about to tell you, it's true, although it's going to sound very bizarre. When I turned, I saw a man in a white long dress with long white sleeves and dark hair. When I saw him, I felt even more of a sense of relief. It was like I was safe as long as he was here. He raised his hand, and he pointed it to the left of where I was standing. "That way?" I said. He nodded. I looked at where he was pointing, and then back at him, but when I tried to face him again, the man was gone. Scared out of my mind, I started running in the direction he pointed, and 5 minutes later, I broke through the trees. When I was finally out, I realized that I was on the other side of the forest, the opposite side of where I had come from. Somehow in that short time, I had walked several kilometers in the wrong direction. I made my way back home and later told this story to my grandma. And of course she told my parents, who were not happy that I did that, and for a long time I was not allowed in the forest. However, when I did tell my grandma about the man, she looked at me and said that maybe it was my guardian angel. I sure hope so, because if not, then perhaps he was the entity that had been crashing through the forest, and maybe he had simply decided to spare me. But I can't be sure. I'm just glad I made it out alive. The Woods by the Park by Sophie. I'd like to think that ghosts are real, but I've never had any proof of their existence. So for most of my life, I've kept simply being neutral to that matter, until I had cold hard evidence myself. that the paranormal was a thing. It happened last summer, and it all changed quickly. In my town, there's this park where a lot of people go during the summer. It's a very happy place that children go to with their families. There are many playground extensions for the kids, and even a small water park. During the day, I always get very positive vibes driving past there. So many people, all happy and dandy. Next to that park is some sort of forest. There's a very long bicycle trail there that countless sport enthusiasts like to roll onto, especially in the warmth of the summer under the cool shade of the trees. Personally, I've only taken my bike there once, and that was when I was very young. Anyway, at night, this place was entirely different. There's that awfully unnerving feeling you hear about that seems to inhabit the place after sunset. It's like how something so full of life feels when it's empty, like the corridors of an old high school after everyone is gone. My friends and I were between the ages of 16 and 20. We were a very close-knit group of friends, and we liked to go to parks and forests at night together, just for the heck of it. We were just hanging out, playing around with the different installations of the park, enjoying pleasant conversations amongst ourselves. At the time, I was getting these odd feelings that came in small, teeny-tiny waves, where I'd be kind of nervous. This never happened before, because usually my anxiety is different, and it would have a reason to it. But I pushed it to the back of my mind and thought it would go away. Suddenly, though, I felt something hit me. It's a very odd feeling and hard to explain, but I'll try. Imagine feeling a huge lump form in your throat, as if you were about to cry or vomit, but not feeling sad or tears or sick. It's like feeling your heart almost skip a beat and shivering from your shoulders down to your knees, almost feeling gooey on the inside, numb. "Hey, you okay? You look kinda pale," one of my friends noted. "Yeah, what's wrong?" the other chuckled, not really taking my distress as seriously. He knows I've done theater for a long time, and he likes pranking me sometimes. But boy, did I regret crying wolf at that point. I don't know, guys," I managed to say. Soon it wasn't only the lump in my throat. My heart was pounding as well, and I felt somewhat sad. But maybe my emotions were going haywire. That is what it felt like. I tucked my hands into my pockets, something I do when I feel vulnerable, and I looked toward the forest. It was so dark that night. We could see the forest illuminated by the moon, but nothing more. The bright, aggressive lights of the adjoining tennis court had shut off hours ago, and we were left in the dark for quite some time. There was this specific spot by the edge of the forest that I just did not feel safe with. Every inch of my body was telling me to get away from it. I decided to test this. I inched closer to it, and the feeling grew worse. I turned my back to it and took a deep breath, holding it. Let me tell you, even at about 15 yards from that spot, it felt like someone was going to grab my shoulders at any moment. So I quickly turned back and got away from where I was. "What's wrong?" my friend asks. It's just this spot it doesn't feel right. I don't know, I don't like it. I want to get away from it," I explained, looking at the ground, trying to manage my brain, which was marinating in a cocktail of confusion and fear. I was just about certain I was going to have a panic attack, but I gave it the benefit of the doubt. "Where exactly?" my friends ask. I pointed at the spot and shoved my hand right back in my pocket. I felt so cold, I didn't want to be in the park anymore. She diverted her gaze to the spot I showed her, and then she said, "What the?" By then, all of us looked at what she was staring at. Exactly where I'd pointed, there was a tall, shadowy figure. It was gigantic, surely over 6 feet, but definitely under 7. It honestly looked like some giant man just standing there in the forest. But that shadow didn't end in feet. We could see its head in the frame of its shoulders and its arms and torso, but around its knees, it was faded and unclear. "My God," my friend yelps, getting behind me. "This is just... what in the world?" my other friend says. All of us stood completely still now, staring at the shadow that we were all seeing. There was no way it wasn't real. We couldn't simply all hallucinate the same thing. We all described it briefly, and it was the same to each of us. My friend, being the person he was, turned on the flashlight of his phone and aimed it directly at the shadowy figure. Ever so slightly, it shifted, and that's when we ran. We didn't go far though, because we were too curious now, and I wanted to take a picture of me near the forest. I had heard that orbs may manifest in photos or videos of haunted places, so I stopped and took a photo. There were two orbs, one right next to my face. The other was near the spot that I was so uncomfortable with, but now the shadow was gone. I was in disbelief. We checked like 20 times to see if the orbs couldn't have been reflected by something, but no. And these orbs didn't look like bugs. By then, I had had enough. We all began running toward the parking lot, and I was beginning to feel dizzy. Quick as lightning, I unlocked my car and we piled inside. Sitting at the driver's seat and shutting the door, I get this huge wave of relief. Suddenly, it's like I'm free of stress that was building inside of me. Still, I had this odd feeling most people get after they're stressed out, like finishing a big presentation that you were nervous about. Your chest is still sort of heavy, but so light at the same time you just want to crumble down to the floor and breathe for a while. After I collected myself, I started the car and we drove away. My friends and I still don't know what that was, but it was no person. People have faces, people have feet. Maybe it was a ghost, or maybe something else. Something dangerous. Maybe that's why my body was itching to run away, far from that place. My friends and I bought a Ouija board, and we're planning to go back to that place to see if we can catch sight of anything. Some may call us reckless, but curiosity pushes us, and we need to know what it was that we saw. Either way, I don't think I can ever forget this. Who or whatever that was, it felt sad, it felt troubled, and it felt angry to some level, and I need to know more. The forests of this world should be respected. We are but guests to its majesty and danger. Without respecting it, you could very well end up lost, hurt, or you may not be found alive if you're found. So when you go back into the woods, remember, be prepared, don't be a doofus, and know that certain entities exist in there that you do not want to run into. So at any time, be ready to run. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. And please, any iPhone, iPad, or Mac listener, give me a quick and honest review on iTunes via the link below. Also, remember you can share your stories at darknessprevails.org to have them in a future episode. If you want to support my channel further, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails. For as long as you donate any amount, you'll unlock access to ad-free MP3 downloads of each episode, and I'll put your name in the credits of full episodes I air on YouTube. Thank you. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous episode. Jose Dominguez says, "I'll give you a Skinwalker encounter." Hey, Jose, stop. I can only get so turned on, man. Zeppelin Girl 86 says, "Is that my husband calling or something more malevolent?" It's probably Jose wanting to give you that Skinwalker thing he's talking about. Just ignore him and he'll go away. Andrew Filkins says, "Time for that post-Halloween goodness." I do this all year, baby. Around here, the scares never stop, and that's why you should click subscribe. Shower Songs Gaming says, they should be called skin crawlers. Well, Skinwalkers is pretty fitting. I'll reserve the name skin crawler to cockroaches, because I had them fall on my face at night when I was trying to sleep. Now that's skin crawling in multiple ways. And Ashley Shake says, Skinwalkers, just what I was craving. Yeah, Skinwalkers are cool and all, but I'm craving pizza and ice cream at the same time, between slices of potato bread. Anyways, guys, that brings us to the end of this episode. But don't worry, because more scary stories are coming soon. So stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my patrons who continue to donate. They're amazing people. Stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one. They walk in the skin of others, looking for their next victims. This world is a strange one. Once believed to be witch doctors who use the skin of various animals to shapeshift and harm people, Skinwalkers in modern times have become something else. You may have seen a skinwalker if you've encountered a beast who mimics human sounds, a creature that doesn't look right, or an animal that isn't entirely one animal. Sightings of these terrifying creatures vary wildly, but one thing remains the same. They are lethal. Skinwalkers want to hurt people. They either see us as prey or insects, and you do not want to end up in their line of sight. So get ready for some allegedly real sightings of Skinwalker encounters. But first, have you had a terrifying experience at an airport? And I'm not talking about those oh so exciting full cavity searches. If you've got a scary airport experience to share with us, be sure to send it over at darknessprevails.org. It might end up in a future video. Thanks. Anyway, does this human skin make me look fat? Number 1. Encounter with a Skinwalker. Submitted by Stephen E. This all happened one day when I went to spend the day with one of my friends. We'll call him David. David is one of my closest friends and has been for the past 7 or 8 years. We grew up in church together and would always beg our parents to let us go to each other's houses after our Sunday services. But that all changed about a couple of years ago. It was July 1st of 2010. David was having a sleepover for his 9th birthday, and I was invited. Now, before I begin this story, I would like to explain the layout of his property, which will be important further into this story. His house is set on a flat level field, and it's about a quarter mile from the nearest house. The backyard is very wide and stretches all the way to the tree line behind the house. They had a swing set for his younger brother set up just a few meters away from the tree line. I arrived at his house at about 4 o'clock. The party did not start until about 4:30, so I was a bit early. He and I decided to go outside to shoot his BB gun to wait for the others to arrive. He dragged an old barrel out from his father's tool shed. Then we put 4 empty cans on top of the barrel and had at it. We were outside for about half an hour, and we soon saw that other people were arriving, so we thought we would head inside. It was a great time, and before we knew it, we were all passed out. That night though, I woke up around 12, and I did not know what woke me up. I was confused as it was still dark out. I just assumed it was my instinct to get up and use the bathroom, but I didn't really have to go that bad. I decided to go downstairs and grab a drink of water, since I was really thirsty. Besides, maybe that's what woke me up. I got a glass of water and began to head back upstairs, when I noticed the slightest movement outside of the kitchen window. I brushed it off though. I assumed it was a cat or something, maybe an animal of the night, and I continued to head back upstairs. When I got back upstairs, I opened the bedroom door, and immediately I noticed that David was standing right in front of his bedroom window. I asked him, "Is everything alright?" But there was no response. I was a bit weirded out by this, so I slowly walked backwards and shut the door. I turned my head to the right and down the hallway, and I noticed the bathroom light was on. I walked down the hallway and knocked on the door. From the other side, I heard someone say, "Yes?" And it was David's voice. This instantly freaked me out, because there was no possible way he could have gotten from the bedroom to the bathroom in that amount of time without me seeing him. So I asked him, "I thought you were in your room." He replied, "No, I've been in here the whole time you were downstairs." I waited for him to get out. After that, I was not about to go anywhere alone. I began to explain to him everything that had happened, and I think he was as freaked out as I was. So he and I decided to go downstairs and watch TV, since his other friends were asleep and we did not want to wake them. We watched some late-night episodes of Fresh Prince and just chilled downstairs for the time being. I was just about to fall asleep again when I heard a thud coming from the window directly behind me facing the backyard. At that moment, I was hesitant to turn around and see what was there. I did though, but I saw nothing. Just the dark tree line and the moon shining on all the tall pines and bright green grass outside. Honestly, I just knew something was off. I woke up David and I asked him if he would go outside with me to investigate the noise I heard. He agreed, though hesitantly, and we both walked quietly to the patio in the back where the noise had been coming from. We didn't go all the way out, due to the fact that it was so dark and we had no flashlights with us. We didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but I soon noticed a figure standing at the edge of the tree line, just standing there staring at us. I could very well make out their silhouette due to the moon shining behind it. I was more than scared by this, so I pushed David to go back inside. We both stood at the glass door watching this thing standing there. He and I both could feel the air become very dreadful, and we smelled the worst smell you could possibly imagine. It suddenly surrounded us and smelled of rotten eggs and burnt flesh, but much stronger. I could see this figure start moving towards us, but in the most bizarre way. It almost looked like a drunk person walking, but at a steady pace, almost in rhythmic form. Right, left, left. As they got closer, we could slowly start making out facial features. Honestly, I wish I had never seen it, because it was the most horrific and disgusting thing I've ever seen. And it was beyond human. Well, at least the face looked human, but beyond that, the head looked like a goat. It had hooves and antlers like you would see on a buck, and it gave off such an evil vibe that I could barely look at it. It didn't take long for David and I to book it back upstairs, screaming like little girls and waking everyone up. We told everyone what we saw when they began to ask, but our parents were not as impressed. Everyone else, though, believed us. To this day, I still believe it was a skinwalker, but every time I tell the story to someone, they convince me it was just my imagination. But I know for a fact that it wasn't, and I know what me and David saw that night was real. To this day, when I ask David about it, he gets this cold sweat and becomes extremely nervous, exactly like I do every time I think back on that moment. Number 2. My experience with Skinwalkers. Submitted by Anonymous. This happened around 2 years ago during the summer. I had stayed with my uncle due to family reasons. He was very into our heritage, as he was a Native American and all. We had stayed near a reservation. I think it was about 3 miles away from his house. He lived in North Carolina, where he owned a bit of land. The natives had been hosting a sort of festival. It was to spread their beliefs about the conservation of the forest used as farmlands. One day I asked him about it, thinking it would be a fun way to bond with each other. And we went. Though the whole time I was there, I felt like I was being watched. Even up to a week after the festival, I could not shake the feeling of being watched, no matter what I did. Late one night, we were out driving in my uncle's old Ford truck. We were on a back road next to the reservation, and of course there were no streetlights. We were on the edge of a big forest. Soon we saw what looked like a deer in the road. It jumped out of the way quickly, so we never saw exactly what it was. Oddly enough, though, my uncle, with a very worried look on his face, stopped the truck. He stared off into the woods, trying to get a good look at whatever it was. A minute or so later, something heavy landed in the bed of our truck, and it weighed the car down and shook it. My first reaction, as anyone would do, was to turn my head and see what was back there. But my uncle wouldn't let me. He pushed my head down so that I would not be able to look up, and then he sped off. My head faced the floor of the vehicle, but I could hear the noises in the bed of the truck move to the roof, and I could hear scratching and screeching noises. It was easily the most chilling sound I've ever heard. Eventually, after about 10 minutes, whatever it was jumped out of the bed. I could tell, because when the weight was lifted, the truck bounced back up, and the truck drove a bit easier. Whatever was back there must have been really heavy. Eventually, back at the house, I asked my uncle what had happened, and he explained to me, in a very solemn voice, that it was indeed a skinwalker. He had forced my head down because looking into their eyes meant certain death. And let's just say it was a secret we kept between us, and I now share this secret with you. Number 3. Skinwalker. Submitted by Tyler M. My first sighting was as a child, when I was about 5 years old. My mother talked about her ancestors who were of Sioux blood, and she used to tell me stories. I was a child, and they were just stories to me, so never once did I assume they were real. One day, my mom and dad took me and my half-brother to a graveyard. In the center was a statue of an Indian chief. It was very large and old. My mom sat there and took pictures, while me and my brother climbed on it. Suddenly, my father turned pale. He grabbed my mother's arm and pointed to the woods. My curious brother and I followed the direction he pointed. Now, it's not common to see wolves where I grew up, especially a pack of them so close to human contact. But I remember counting 9 wolves. Each one gave me a sense of what I was doing offended them. I remember my dad quickly picking me and my brother up and carrying us over to the car. Then, faster than we came, we left. As we drove away, I stared back at those wolves, and they were looking back at me, until we were out of sight. Several years later, I was 12, and I was always drawn to this portion of the woods about a half-mile from our home. I grew up in a small town, and I was beginning to read stories of old myths and legends of demons and shapeshifters and skinwalkers. I went on a hike through the woods one day, just doing what kids do, and I was enjoying myself. I didn't think much of it until I found a small clearing. It was in this swampy area. I had always heard rumors of a hermit living in these woods. Supposedly, people had seen him here and there, but I was told no one ever got close. Not sure that I believed it, I began to walk this marshy area until I got a weird feeling in my gut. It was that feeling that something was looking at you. I stopped and I looked towards the sun. It was maybe noon and clouds were light, and before my walk, it had been a hot day out. So when this cold chill came upon me, it was alarming to say the least. I turned to see a figure looming in a dark portion of the woods, and my body turned to stone. I remember sheer panic rising up in my throat, but my body refused to comply with the natural instinct to run for dear life. Their eyes were the creepiest part. They reminded me of topaz. They were very demonic. Soon my petrification was over, so I turned and ran back the way I came. But mere seconds later, I could hear something behind me. Something was stalking me. I wasn't sure if it was hunting me, but I felt it watching me as I ran. I had never known such horror until that moment. I never returned to those woods ever again. I was so scared I slept with the lights on for days. My dad and I used to cruise around and talk away from my mother's ears because she didn't condone dark paranormal talk. I guess she didn't believe in such things. He told me of a time when he was 17. He and his friends went out to a nature reserve in their hometown. They were drinking beer and having fun. My dad said that he had told them that he could not drink much because he had to be the driver home. He told me that the moon was high and so it was bright, so the woods and the road were lit up. He said he was just cruising like we are now, and he didn't really want to be home right away. He was taking his time, when all of a sudden he saw this animal on the side of the road. It was very large and was hunched over eating some roadkill. He said when he stopped the vehicle, the creature stopped moving and then suddenly snapped to meet his eyes. He said whatever it was stood to about 7 feet tall. He said it looked like a mix between a man and a wolf. He said he was so scared that he ripped it into reverse and tried his best not to panic. Then he floored it. But this creature proceeded to run after him, and somehow, even though my dad was doing about 60 on the road, the thing was still out of his passenger window, keeping up with the vehicle. He thought to himself that he was going to die, but eventually he made it back to the main road. He said he felt like he never lost it, that he could feel it there in the woods somewhere following them, and all in all, he was afraid to go home. This story really shook me, and I began to believe in the stories that I read. Later on, when I was about 18, I came into contact with something from what he told me about as a child. I was out with a friend hunting squirrels in the woods. We had about 5 squirrels, and we were carrying them back to our vehicle, when suddenly we saw this blood trail. So obviously, being morbid young adults, we followed the trail. As soon as we came up to the end of the trail, sheer terror struck my face. I looked up to this large oak tree with the torso of a large deer hanging from it. At first, I assumed that some hunter couldn't wait until he got home, so they were prepping the deer in the woods in an unorthodox fashion. Besides, there weren't any animals around that could do that, and the body was far from clean. It was messy and looked like it had almost exploded all over the place, and there were obvious claw marks in the side of its torso. I looked over at my friend, and at that point he was panicking. He was reloading his .22. Every time he spoke, he stuttered, and his face was pale white. Seeing him act like that, it began to scare me, so I started to reload my weapon as well, because the only other weapon we had besides guns was an old hatchet, and that wasn't going to do much. We were miles from town, and we had not seen anyone in the large wooded area all day. So we ran the opposite way of the bloody trail, when we heard sticks snapping behind us in a quick pace. Soon we came upon this small cave out in the woods, but in front of it lay the other half of that deer. All either of us could feel at that moment was pure fear. I tried telling my friend not to panic, but we pointed our guns at the direction we were hearing the sounds, aware that something was watching us. Like fearful idiots, we began firing in random directions, trying to kill whatever it was, not even thinking about other people's lives or our own. When there was no ammunition left, we both turned and ran. And since that day, we have vowed never to tell anyone about it, and this is the first time I've ever told another soul. Number 4. A real Skinwalker sighting. Submitted by Anonymous. I live in Utah, and it's one of the most overlooked states, but that doesn't mean it hasn't had its fair share of monster sightings and paranormal experiences. Anyway, my family goes camping every summer for 5 days in Ashley National Forest up in the high Uintas. So my family arrived at the campsite at around 10:30 p.m. It would have been darker out if it had not been for the huge bonfire my family made. So I was setting up my tent when I saw 2 red eyes in the trees nearby. It startled me, but I didn't panic. I really didn't have any reason to be concerned. It was just some animal in the woods. Therefore, I didn't pay it much mind. Later the next morning, I was curious, so I walked over to the spot where the eyes were, and I saw deep hoof prints of a deer in the ground. There was a massive population of deer around here, so there was nothing wrong with this. I ignored it and went to breakfast. A few nights later, on the last night, I asked my cousin if she would go to the bathroom with me, and she said yes. As she and I were walking to the outhouse, we saw what looked like a goat on the side of the mountain. We thought this was odd because we had never seen goats up here before, and this didn't look like a mountain goat at all. So we went on to the bathroom, but when we came back from it, we saw the goat again, but this time it was facing us, and that's when we saw the brightest red eyes we'd ever seen. They were so similar to the ones I'd seen on the first night. Creeped out, we walked slowly away from this weird animal, but all the way back to camp I could feel those eyes on me. The next morning we decided to go fishing before we left, so we packed up everything and picked a spot to fish on the river. Keep in mind that this is Indian territory, which is already a dumb idea because we could have gotten fined, but we headed out anyway and caught a lot of fish. So after we were done fishing, my cousin and I spotted something in the brush along the edge of the forest nearby. And sure enough, there were those same red eyes. But this time it wasn't from a goat or a deer. All we could make out was a pale, skinny figure that was both human and inhuman at the same time. But I'll never forget those eyes. They were the same eyes as before. My cousin and I just stared at the thing when it finally broke the silence. It bellowed this ear-piercing scream. And that's when we began to book it back to the campground as fast as we could. But the thing was chasing us through the undergrowth. Whatever it was gaining on us fast, but we could see the campground, so we booked it even harder. Soon, we got to the camp, and the thing was nowhere to be seen. It was gone, but not before giving one final ear-piercing screech. My friend and I don't talk about what we saw often, but we know it to be real, and we both believe it was a skinwalker. Number 5. The Twin Skinwalkers. Submitted by John. I had the great honor of meeting not one but 2 skinwalkers at the same time. Let me go over the landscape first. From where I was, to the right of me was an open grass field, and next to the grass field was the community college I would be later attending. To the other side of me on the left was a golf course that intertwines with a small forest and path going around. I have been on that path several times before, always getting this weird feeling that something wasn't right about it. It was off, just not right. I was out doing what I usually do during summer nights, walking around listening to music. Because it was summer, the nights were nice and cool. All I needed was a t-shirt and a pair of cargo shorts, plus my favorite hat and shoes. It was about 12:30 at night when I was passing the golf course near my house. I got the feeling that something was watching me. Of course, I've gotten this feeling before, but it felt stronger this night. So I stopped and I looked around several times to see if there was someone other than myself outside. Spotting no one, I took out my headphones to listen, hoping I could find out that way. It was then that I realized it was way too quiet. The sounds of nature were gone. No sounds of cars in the distance like there usually was. Certainly there should have been some sort of noise, but I heard absolutely nothing. It was very chilling. I stayed still for a moment, thinking. Then I remembered that I had brought my flashlight with me. Being delighted that I had brought it, I reached down to my pocket and pulled it out. If something was there, I was hoping to catch its glowing eyes in the flashlight beam. When I clicked on the flashlight beam, almost instantly, I saw these glowing eyes. I stood stock still as I stared at what was before me. I did not expect 2 pairs of glowing orange eyes staring right at me. I've never seen eyes like that. They were almost literally glowing orange. Not sure what to do other than stay still as possible. I just stared right back at them. It was then that I noticed how high the pair of eyes were off of the ground. They were maybe 7 feet from the ground. Holy crap, I thought. What kind of animal stands that tall around here? I noticed that they never blinked even once. It was extremely creepy, and I kept hoping that it was some sort of trick of the eyes. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, staring back at these creepy eyes. I was trying to think of what I could do. I did not want to get any closer than what I was, and I didn't want to risk getting attacked by whatever this thing was. If I kept going along the path, I'd be going right past it. Running might have been my only option. With that on my mind, I slowly started to turn my back so it was facing the field, my flashlight still on the glowing eyes. I was very cautious, very slow. I took baby steps, one at a time. When I thought I got far enough away from that thing, I decided to walk a bit faster. I wanted to get a good head start ahead of this thing before it ever decided to give chase. Before I turned off my flashlight and put it back in my pocket, I remembered that my music was still going. I looked down for a second, and I saw that my earbuds were hanging out of my shirt, and I've always hated them like that while running. So I decided to put them back in to listen to music, whatever would take my mind off of things. As soon as they were back in my ears and my flashlight was back in my pocket, I made a mad dash for home. I was going so fast that my hat almost flew off, so I quickly turned the hat around so it didn't fall, and I continued to sprint. I just kept telling myself to ignore it, to run faster and faster, and then I did the one thing you don't want to do. I looked behind me. I'm curious by default, so of course I looked behind me to see if whatever it was had given chase, and what do you know? It did, but it confused me. From the short glimpse I got of it, it looked to be a really large coyote, borderline wolf size. The sight of it made my adrenaline rush. and I pumped my legs to go even faster. When I glanced back again, there were 2 of them, both keeping up and following me. As I approached my house with these things still tailing me, I was thinking of the fastest way to enter the house. I did not want to be outside too long trying to get in, so I decided going through the garage would be my best bet. Again, I looked behind me, and I didn't see anything, but I was not about to relax. As soon as I got up to the garage, I pushed in the code and opened it just enough to get under the door. I rushed over to the other side to close it. I finally felt a bit safe, and my adrenaline was wearing down. At that point, my lungs were burning as if they were on fire. I was gasping for air, slumping to the ground, just sitting there for a moment. For a long time after this, I wondered what I saw, even if they were the biggest coyotes in existence, or actual wolves where there shouldn't be. That doesn't explain those orange eyes. No animal has eyes like that. It was far from natural. Number 6. Australian Skinwalker. Submitted by Carly. I'm a young woman from a remote part of Western Australia. I'm surrounded by thousands of kilometers of farmland and bushland, forest if you're not familiar with the term bush, and we have a large variety of native wildlife on our farm and in surrounding bushlands. Anyway, on to the story. Every day after work, I walk my 2 border collies through a selected bush track, which is roughly 10 kilometers long as a way to unwind from my crappy job. I've seen some very creepy things in there before, such as dead kittens and livestock, which have been dumped by farmers and thrown across logs in a creepy fashion, but that's nothing compared to what I saw on this day. It is important to note that since we are so rural here, there's a severe lack of people. But sometimes I still pass a camper or 2, and sometimes even someone growing drugs out in the remote bush. So as I was walking my dogs late last year in the middle of summer, I was surprised when my 2 dogs stopped and began to growl. I could see the hair on the back of their necks began to stand up. I thought that it may have just been a kangaroo or a feral pig, as my younger dog gets quite worked up when they're around. This thought quickly faded when I felt cold, and I broke out in goosebumps, even though it was a hot 37 degrees Celsius outside. A couple of seconds after the temperature dropped, I rounded the corner, and there was a little girl standing in the middle of the bush trail, and suddenly seeing someone there scared me. The little girl was looking in the opposite direction with her back to me and looked around 7 years old by her height. She had dirty blonde medium-length hair, a plain red shirt, and black shorts. As I was about to laugh to myself about letting this little girl scare me, who was probably just camping with her parents, the girl turned, and she looked at me. This was no girl. Her eyes were solid black. Not black as in contact black, but a hollow, lifeless black. This thing opened its mouth and let out an ear-splitting howl. It turned and ran back on all 4s into the bush. Needless to say, I hightailed it out of there, dragging my poor cowering, frightened farm dogs, and ran for about 6 kilometers. I was completely filled with fear and covered in goosebumps, and I felt adrenaline rush inside me. My lungs were burning and my legs ached and my head spun. After about another 2 kilometers, I finally got home. I ran inside and locked the dogs and myself in my bedroom. I was too scared to come out to even eat dinner. After that, I did not walk through that bush for a month. But since walking again, I have not experienced anything out of the ordinary. I've been walking this bush since I was 10 years old, and I've never experienced anything like this before. I'm sharing this with you, trying to figure out what I saw. Judging by the feral look in her eyes and the way she scurried away, perhaps it was an Australian skinwalker, a native aboriginal spirit disguised as a little girl. Or maybe, if I'm lucky, it was just some really effed up prank played by some campers. Either way, I'll never walk through the bush the same way again. And number 7. Something from the desert followed me. Submitted by Xiaoxi or Su Wei. Many of you may not believe this story, and honestly I'm having a bit of a hard time believing it myself. I live in a small community in the middle of an empty desert. My biological father is a bit of a menace. He has thrown several of my cats and some strays I used to feed into the desert. Several of them have not been seen or heard from again. Now, to the story. I recently began to hear one of my cats' meows from the desert, and have taken my dog walking out there searching for her. After 3 days of going out, calling, searching, and getting no actual replies when I was out there, I finally realized something. Those mews I had been hearing did not sound right. There was something completely off about them, and I had been able to ignore that until I began to hear frantic cries from the cat in the desert. Sneaking out once again, I just stood near the entrance, calling and looking around, while my dog sniffed at an old abandoned mattress. It was around sunset, and honestly I did not like being out there when all I could see were shadows and just a few feet in front of me. I stayed there for 10 minutes until I started hearing what I thought were troublemakers trying to scare me, or at least trying to sneak up on me for whatever reason. So I quickly scooped up my dog and dashed back inside the community walls, making my way back home, literally across the entrance from the desert, a hole in a brick wall. That night was filled with the mews outside my window, and they kept sounding wrong, like distorted. I was very grateful that I remembered to shut my curtains, because I did not want to see what was making those noises, because it was not my cat. 2 hours later, the meowing finally stopped, but when I looked at the window, I could see the shadow of a face pressed against it. As I looked at the face, I heard strange, distorted cries again. Suddenly, without warning, the face turned, and then the figure disappeared. Soon after that, I heard the footsteps and talking from kids outside the window. Something was mimicking voices. The next day, I decided to spend a week at my grandmother's to get away. It felt like I was losing my mind. The first few nights were pretty normal and quiet, until one early morning I was standing near my older cousin's window, and I heard those same meows again. So I woke up my cousin, and she said she could hear them too. I don't like when people can see or hear things I'm dealing with, because that makes it more real, and that was something I couldn't deny anymore. While at my grandma's, I would usually sit outside late and visit with my cousin's 2 cats until she got home from work. However, for the last few nights I was there, I did not feel safe continuing my routine of waiting outside. One night I was foolish, and I waited outside, and I could hear chirping and meowing from the golf course across from my grandma's house. The sounds did not stop until I hid behind one of the pillars on her porch and stood motionless. I'd been home for 2 days now, and whatever that is stays outside my window, torturing me. I refuse to walk my dog at night unless someone is with me, and I have never returned to the desert. Every now and then I'll hear a whisper and book it back into the house. I'm praying and hoping that this is just someone's sick joke, but my grandma believes it's a skinwalker. We've even found a few footprints outside my window after it had rained, and the strangest part is, they start out animal and slowly become human. I feel like I'm slowly going insane. Skinwalkers are horrific creatures of Native American folklore. Sometimes they might be other people with sinister powers and purpose, and sometimes they're creatures trying to mimic humans to lure them in. And who knows what happens when they get you? Maybe you wake up in bed thinking it was a nightmare, or maybe you wind up dead in the forest with all your skin torn off. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send us your airport horror stories soon at darknessprevails.org. Thanks. Do you hear that voice coming from within the trees? Move toward it if you want to die. This world is a strange one. Your favorite monster is back. I've got 10 Skinwalker stories for you tonight. These creatures from Native American folklore are on the prowl and looking for new skins to wear. Maybe yours will be next. Enjoy this mini marathon on this nightmare beast. If you missed it, I did my first live stream yesterday. Check out the 2-hour video via the link in the description. Stay tuned next Friday for another live stream at 5 p.m. Central. Also, I would love to do a deep web stories video, so if you've got a story from the deep web, go to deathbyfear.com to send it to me. Don't forget to subscribe and stay notified for more horror stories in the future. Now, get your skin suits ready. They better not be dirty when the Skinwalker rips them off of you. Number 1. Navajo Skinwalker in Colorado. Submitted by Hunter L. My story begins in Colorado. I was 14 years old at the time. My family was taking a trip to visit my grandmother, who lives deep in the country. We were planning to stay over a few nights and enjoy the peace and quiet of the country. I've always been more of an indoorsy person, but I did love taking a nice hike through the woods from time to time. The highway drive was long and uneventful, but once we finally got there, I was super excited. After all, I had my own room in the beautiful cabin my grandmother lived in, with an amazing view of the lake and forests surrounding the property. I exchanged greetings with her, and after a few minutes of idle conversation, I headed to my room. I pulled out my laptop and began to get set up for a quality gaming session when I first heard the howling. It sounded like a wolf's cry, but slower, almost distorted, like if you recorded the howl and played it back at half the speed and lowered the pitch. That's how it sounded. It was very creepy, but having little to no experience living in the country, I brushed it off, assuming it was some animal I wasn't accustomed to. Soon the sun began to set, and I was exhausted at the time, partly from the really long car ride. I began to get settled into bed, and despite the thick comforter, something didn't feel right. It's a feeling that's hard to describe, like something was misplaced or missing. I didn't know what it was, but again I brushed it off, telling myself it was just weird to sleep in an unfamiliar place, and soon I drifted off to sleep. I woke up around 10 in the morning feeling really well rested, and I looked through my window. I could see that it had gotten foggy, as there were billowing clouds of mist drifting through the trees outside, and it was raining too, heavily. It was a bit difficult to see through the windows due to the excessive amount of water outside. I threw on some pajamas and went to grab some breakfast. When I walked into the kitchen, there was a note on the table. According to the note, my family left the house to grab some medication for my grandma, and that they'd be back in a couple of hours. So I settled with eating some frosted flakes. I was sitting on the comfortable couch directly under the living room window, watching the rain and fog roll in. Then again, I heard that eerie howl, the same howl from the night before. It was so slow and thick, so deliberate. As that happened, I noticed a figure creep forward through the fog. Of course, foggy weather in the country can be extremely thick. I couldn't see anything over 5 feet from the window, and I could barely make it out. But it looked like a dog or a wolf, almost anyway. The feeling that something was wrong, very, very wrong with this animal suddenly hit me. Slowly as the form of this thing came through the fog, I realized why I was feeling that way. The creature was standing on its back legs. Its back legs, I thought. I was shocked and confused. When I finally could think clearly, I looked at the creature in more detail. Its legs were twisted, bent in weird ways, almost like it was hit by a car. Of course, up here by the cabin, the closest road that's often used is a good mile away. As I looked on in horror, the creature spun around, and on its 2 hind legs, sprinted. In moments, it disappeared into the thick fog. As it turned around, though, I could see that it had no tail. Literally no tail, like it was ripped off or never there. The moment I snapped myself out of that trance, I instantly ran back to my room, shutting and locking the door. I hopped on my laptop, trying to Google and find out exactly what I saw. When my family finally got back, around 3, I waited until my parents were out of the room to tell my grandma. My parents would never believe me anyway. She was part Native American, but not that she was Navajo. She told me what she believed I saw was a skinwalker. Supposedly, it's a shape-shifting spirit or witch that takes the form of animals in order to harm people. However, it can never perfectly replicate the animal it takes the form of. When we left 3 days later, I was happy to get out of those foggy woods. After researching the legend of the Skinwalker further, I honestly believe that that is what I saw. So to all of those listening, be careful when you go deep into the countryside of Colorado, If I met that creature outside of that cabin, I don't think I'd be here to share this story. Number 2. Creature, submitted by Brianna. I live in a little town in New Mexico. This town is surrounded by dirt roads, dairies, and fields. There is a state park about 10 to 15 minutes outside of town. One day, my boyfriend and I were at this park. It must have been around 3 in the morning. We didn't really have anywhere else to hang out, so we would often go there to have some private time. We were about to leave, and we came up to this little intersection where the entrances were, and we see a vehicle turning in. So we sat and waited for the vehicle to pass, but the closer it came, the slower it got. It was a bit unnerving. I was getting nervous because we do have gangs out here. As the car approached, we noticed that the driver was an old lady. She was a tiny thing with curly white hair. And this is when things got weird. Remember, she's going very slow, so we got plenty of time to soak in this image of the lady. As she passed, she turned her head towards us. Her eyes were solid black. I swear to God, there were no whites to her eyes. Not like empty sockets, but as if she had black eyeballs, or maybe like each eye was just one solid pupil. We both froze as she slowly drove past. All the while, we were both filled with fear and dread. I'm not sure what we saw, but there were so many unanswered questions. Why would a little old woman be at the park 15 minutes outside of town at 3 in the morning? What was she doing there? Why was she driving so slow and just staring at us the whole time? We were very weirded out, and we started questioning what we saw, making excuses that we were just maybe tired, even though we both know what we saw. Well, a few months later, we drove out to the dirt roads to get away for a little bit. The sun was just setting. I knew we should have went home as soon as it got dark, but we decided to park and chill out. Suddenly, we both saw something out of the corner of our eyes. Instantly, we both jerked our heads around to see what it was. It was humanoid in shape, dirty with very long legs, but it ran on all fours. It looked more like a person trying to run on all fours, because when it ran, it just didn't look right. At an unnatural speed, it ran into the field next to us, and in a split second, it was gone. We were both so freaked out by this experience that we started the car and left immediately. New Mexico has many stories about skinwalkers, but I've never really paid attention or tried to believe those stories. I thought it was just native superstition. But when we mentioned these stories to a couple of friends, they all began to open up about the weird things they've seen out on those dirt roads. After hearing those stories, after what we saw those nights, we have not been out driving like that again in a while, because now it just seems too dangerous. Who knows what those fields are hiding? Based on the stories of the Skinwalkers, I believe either of these sightings could be those menacing eyes of the old woman. It could have been a skinwalker wearing the skin suit of an old lady. Anyway, we're definitely not going to take any more chances out there. The last thing I want is to be out in the forest alone as something watches me through the brush. Number 3. My disturbing drive from Florida to Ohio. Submitted by Eon. I'm a Marine, and I just recently got back from Japan, as I'm being reassigned for recruiting duty. Upon my arrival back stateside, I found out I had to go to my next station early. Oh, there's nothing like hearing bad news right off the bat. Well, anyway, I live in the Orlando-Tampa area of Florida, and I had a long drive ahead of me to reach my destination, so I went ahead and got on the road. Later that night, I had been on the road all day going up I-95 North when I merged onto I-77 North. By the time I drove into Charlotte, North Carolina, it was getting dark fast and I was completely exhausted. I was seriously considering pulling over to get a little bit of shut-eye when, out of nowhere, I saw the most terrifying thing. In front of me, right in my headlights, something darted in front of my vehicle. I slammed on the brakes immediately, and my car came to a stop. Whatever it was seemed to stop for a moment before continuing to cross the road. During this quick moment, I was able to gather many details about this creature. It was inhumanly skinny and lanky, and its skin was hairless and pale. All in all, the thing was humanoid in shape. Well, before I even knew what I was doing, I got out of my car, still worried that I almost hit a person, and I watched this thing dart into the woods on the other side of the interstate. The most chilling part of this, though, was when it stopped on the other side, just to look back in my direction, to let out this ear-piercing scream or howl. I don't know which. To my astonishment, it was met with a reply on my side of the interstate and connecting woods. Something on the other side, another of its kind, had let out another scream in reply. So basically, alone in the dark on the side of the road, I was surrounded by these things. Without wasting any more time, I jumped back into my car and I booked it out of there. I'm currently sitting in a hotel room at the Super 8, about 12 miles from where I had encountered this thing. And I can leave you with this. My time in Afghanistan was far less frightening than the sound that this creature emitted. And I swear to God, for the rest of my time alive on this planet, I hope I don't see this thing again. Number 4. Rock-throwing Skinwalker. Submitted by Colton. I'm Native American from the Navajo tribe, and this story took place when I was about 5 years old. I'm from Utah, and my grandma lives in New Mexico, so from time to time we would visit her and have cookouts and whatnot. To set up where this takes place, my grandma has 2 plots of land that she used to live between during different seasons. She had a home in the desert beneath a mountain, and another within the mountain that requires a truck to get to, and which happened to be a hogan from when my grandma was a child. This time of season, she lived up in the mountain, which is between spring and summer. Up in the mountain is lush with foliage and a dark forest that would make daytime look ominous. My parents would run to town to help her run errands and buy supplies that she needed. This time they left around 4 in the afternoon and said they would be back very late. To give an idea of how far we were from the nearest city, Shiprock if you're wondering, it would take around 2 hours to go down the mountain and drive to the city. We already expected them to be back late in the night. In my family, I'm the baby. I have my parents, my eldest sister, my older brother, and my other sister. And the team that went down to the city was my older brother and my other sister. The ones that wanted to stay up in the Hogan were my eldest sister and my cousin and me. So that'll give you some idea of who was there and where we were. It's around 9 p.m. that night, and we're sitting in the Hogan doing nothing because it's a moonless night outside, and it's pretty terrifying when you're 5 years old, and literally the only light is from a gas lantern. Suddenly, the dogs start barking at something. Soon this escalates to the sound of them fighting something, as if they were trying to defend themselves or fend something off. From the sound of the dogs fighting and whimpering, my sister is trying to see what's happening from the only window in the Hogan. But of course she can't see anything, it's just that dark. My cousin and I are scared out of our minds because this never happened before. The dogs may bark or growl, but they never sounded so freaked out. They were acting like their lives were in danger. And even scarier after all the fighting, there was complete silence. After a couple of seconds, we heard what sounded like rocks being thrown at our little Hogan. We began to panic because something got rid of the dogs and is now coming after us. My cousin lives in this Hogan with my grandma, and they knew that a revolver was hiding in her drawer with her clothes. He tells my sister to grab it and tells her how to load it and arm it. What we were planning to do was to run from the thing and flee to our relative that lives across this 200-yard field of dirt and knee-high grass in the moonless night. I just remember thinking how terrible of a plan that was, like it was some sort of situation right from a horror movie. I completely remember that feeling of sheer terror the moment we opened that door, only to be met by pitch blackness outside. My sister, armed with a revolver, followed up behind us, while my cousin with a bat led us. So we sprint outside, like a bunch of bats out of hell, and I'm trying to keep up and not lag behind, but it's hard. I don't remember running 200 yards so fast, but being a panicking 5-year-old kid, thinking he's about to be pounced on by some creature, probably helped me across the way. Thankfully, we arrive at my relative's house, And of course, he's really mad that we're there so late, and he notices my sister with the gun. Long story short, she gets scolded for having the gun out and armed with kids around. He takes the gun and fires 3 times in the air and walks back to the Hogan. He stays with us until my parents come back. That's the most I can remember, and I know a lot of other creepy stuff happened at my grandma's, but that was by far the scariest, because who wants to run through an open field with the feeling of something chasing you? The next day when we checked on the dogs, or what was left of them, we saw a very disgusting sight. Something had killed them. Whatever that thing was, it finished off the dogs and began to throw rocks at our Hogan. I can only believe that it was trying to lure us out, which it successfully did, but I have no idea why it didn't attack us, because it literally had us in the palm of its hand. Number 5. Hunted, submitted by Justin. My friends and I love paranormal stuff, and we love being scared. We practically study this stuff. So by now we know about Wendigo, Skinwalkers, and many other demons. But until this one night, we never really knew what being scared meant. That night was about 3 weeks ago, when me and my friends decided to go into the forest in my backyard. There were 3 of us, me, T, and Josh. They were staying the night at my house when Josh came up with the idea to go for a walk in the woods. This was surprising to T and I, as he was usually the one that was scared. He said it'd be fun to try to creep ourselves out in the dark. We agreed and got some flashlights, then headed out in my backyard. Now, in my backyard, there was no fence separating the forest. The forest was huge, and I still haven't seen the end of it from my usual walks, and that's even during the daytime. We all walked close together for about 5 minutes, when things started to happen. All of our flashlights began blinking and then just shut off. This couldn't have just been the batteries, because it happened at the same time. "What the heck?" we heard Josh say. Then he just took off back to the house. "Oh my God, Josh," I said under my breath. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind us. I turned toward it, trying to turn my flashlight on again, but nothing happened. T stepped closer to me, as we both stared into the dark forest in silence. I wanted to run, but something held me back, maybe a morbid curiosity. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the darkness, but soon I could see what made that twig snap. It was a tall creature with a hunched back. The ribs of this beast were showing, with flesh hanging from it. The head was of a deer skull, and instantly I knew what this might be. Perhaps a skinwalker or wendigo. It was like seeing something straight from your nightmares, something so unreal that you deny that you're seeing it. But it was there, so vivid. I'll never forget the sight of it. Honestly, things like wendigos and skinwalkers and creatures like that, they were just stories before. But now the story came to life before me, and I was scared for my life. I nearly screamed at the sight of it, but I tried to hold it in, trying not to make eye contact with it. I whispered to T, "You need to run as soon as I do." I was far from sure of myself, but I thought maybe we could run fast enough to get back to my house before it got to us. So I bolted. T took off right toward the house, but my plan was to cut off in a different direction before I headed home. That way at least one of us could make it. Not too long after that, though, I began to hear footsteps behind me, and my heart began to race. As those footsteps caught up to me, I turned to face my fate. But there was Josh with a different flashlight. I'd never been more thankful to see him. "Holy crap, dude, are you okay?" he asked me. "Man, we saw something." The look on his face said he didn't completely believe me, but he replied to me, "I just came back to look for you guys to make sure you're okay." Still completely terrified, I looked back deeper into the forest behind me, when an ear-piercing screech broke through the air. I wanted to just be home. I've never heard anything like this before, and it sent chills down my body. Josh and I ran as fast as we could towards T in the house, but whenever we looked behind us, we heard footsteps coming from something else. We just kept running as fast as we could with something trailing close behind us, when suddenly my head caught an overhanging branch and it knocked me to the ground. Josh mustn't have seen because he just kept running. I lay there on the forest floor, scared, tired, and now in pain. I was too afraid to look behind me. I just knew that I would see that thing standing over me, waiting to kill me. Thankfully, the next thing I saw was T running through the bush back towards me. He actually came back for me. Before I could be filled with hope, though, T stopped in his tracks before he could reach me. He knelt down, and he didn't once take his eyes off of something behind me. His eyes were so wide and his mouth was open. What was he seeing? He looked so scared. It was almost more terrifying than actually seeing this thing, just knowing that it was right behind me. Then those same footsteps that were following us before, I heard them again, but this time, they were walking away. If I wanted to survive this was my chance. I got up and I sprinted to the house, T just barely in front of me. The whole way there, we didn't see or hear anything else. When we got back to the house, Josh was waiting at the back door with his head barely poking out of it. I rolled my eyes when I saw him, but none of us said another word for the rest of the night. We got inside, locked all the doors, and just sat there. We all waited for the sun to come up, the three of us in silent agreement that we should probably never go back in those woods again. Number 6. Wendigo or Skinwalker. Submitted by Anonymous. When I was a child, I remember playing hide and seek with my friends, who I still talk to this day. But it was back then that we stopped playing hide and seek because something happened. My house was backed by a forest of pine trees, so there wasn't a whole lot of brush and you could see about a mile in. Keep in mind we were about 3 miles away from any other houses, so it was often very quiet. As well as being very creepy at night, it also seemed very eerie during the day. I always got chills when I was out there. Yet that didn't stop us from camping, hunting, and just playing in the woods. So one summer evening, myself, my mom, dad, and friends, Jeff and Lily, had gone out to camp. What was special about this time was the fact that we went deeper than we've ever been into these woods. After hiking out, we set up camp, and by then it was already getting dark. We whined to my parents to let us play for almost 10 minutes until they said fine. So it was about 8, and it was dark out. We got some flashlights and we began our games. Of course, like always, I counted first. I began counting, all the while hearing giggles and running feet behind me. After 30 seconds, I turned and I listened. Now, keep in mind, it was summer. You should hear birds, frogs, and crickets. But at the time, I heard nothing. Not wanting to seem like a wuss, I sucked it up and started seeking. After a minute or so, I heard movement, and I instantly saw something that would scar me for the rest of my life. I saw a tall, pale creature, about 8 feet tall, and it was still hunched over. Its limbs were thin and elongated, with long, bony fingernails. Its hair was white and thin. The moment I saw it, I screamed so loud, it turned to me, and this thing, it actually spoke. It said to me,
"Hush, child. I don't want to hurt you."
Now, being a 12-year-old, I had some sense that I knew this thing was going to kill me. I tried to move, but I was completely petrified, so afraid that I could barely breathe. While stuck in a staring contest with this yellow-eyed creature, I tried to remember my way back. The second it took a step toward me, I grabbed my flashlight and I bolted back the way I came. As I was running, I could hear this thing behind me. I turned to see the spot where our camp had been, only to see the remnants of a fire. So instead, I headed home. When I was a few feet away from my yard, I hit a root and fell flat on my face. And I thought, honestly, that I was dead. But as I fell, my dad came out with a shotgun and screamed every possible swear out into the woods. Now, this whole time, I didn't hear footsteps behind me. I just ran. But then as I lay there facing my house, facing my father, only inches behind me, I heard the same voice as before.
"I'll be seeing you soon."
I nearly fainted right there when I realized how close it had come to me. The voice was only a few inches behind me. As soon as I could get myself back up, I ran inside, running into my mother's arms and crying. Apparently, my family had seen this creature in the forest before me. They were unable to find me, and having to care for the other children, they had to get home fast. They had left me. A week later, we moved closer to the city, and we ditched all of our outdoor gear. I remember something a week later. We set up a trail cam, but no one dared to go out there. Ever since that night, I've been wondering what we saw, and to my understanding from my research, I think we may have seen a skinwalker. Mostly, I'm just glad to be alive, and I will never be going out there to see that thing again. Number 7. Skinwalker on Easter. Submitted by Anakin. It was the last day of school for Easter, and I was excited for it, until I had a bit of an accident. I ran headfirst into the mirror on a truck, and I ended up having to go to the hospital. I spent a whole day and the next morning there, but I was soon feeling a bit better. So the night before Easter, my cousin and I were walking to the nearest gas station to buy a few snacks and some junk food. I noticed on my right was a small patch of woods. My cousin then spoke up and said, "Dude, we should go in there." I just looked at him like he was a madman, but I agreed to go. Maybe it was just peer pressure. Boy, was that a bad idea. For one, my injury was making my head hurt, and then when we walked about 50 yards in, I began to hear something that sounded like something eating or thrashing at meat. I told this to my friend, and he told me to remain calm, that it was probably a bobcat or a coyote. I told him in this part of Michigan there's rarely anything like that. Then he said maybe it's a wolverine or something. But then again, this far north, I thought to myself, that's not likely. We ventured on though, trying to ignore the sound. Later, I hear something that sounded like my cousin, but he's right next to me. But coming from the trees nearby, I hear his same voice. "Dude, come over here." We both stopped in our tracks, now completely petrified. We both knew that that wasn't him. I could even see the look of terror on his face when he heard it. As we sat there thinking silently, wondering what we should do, we then saw something of a silhouette dart between trees in front of us. We turned tail and ran back to the gas station. But before we exited those woods, we could see the same silhouette darting between trees around us. Whatever it was easily keeping pace with us, and it seemed to be just toying with us. We ran harder, pushing ourselves to the limits. We didn't stop until we made it back to his house. There, we tried to take our minds off of things. We didn't feel tired after that. We stayed up playing video games and watching videos. The next morning, my mom picked me up, and I couldn't be happier to get away from those woods. Needless to say, I won't be going back to that patch of woods. Number 8. I saw something at the campsite. Submitted by Firebolt U. I was 15 years old and I thought I was invincible. My mom forced me to go to the Boy Scouts, and it was my first campout with them. Now, before this campout, I already had a good amount of badges and was strong and sporty, but I was always up for something new. Well, we piled into the truck and were driven to the campsite. I still remember what the camp looked like. It was filled with chipped pieces of wood and was surrounded by forest. We started off with the usual, making a fire and playing manhunt with more people my age. As the sun began to set and our scoutmasters, let's call them Benjamin and Thomas, told us older kids to go into the forest and find some food, such as rabbits or birds to eat. So we went into the damp forest, unsupervised. We all split up so we could cover more ground. I decided to find some rabbit holes. I'd been around this area before with my parents, never camping though, so I knew where some rabbit holes were. I began to hum to myself as I walked. This is when I first saw something. In the distance, behind a tree, there was the silhouette of a deer with antlers. The antlers had many points, so I assumed it was a large buck. The thing was standing still, as if it was trying to listen. I never once saw it move, so I continued to walk slowly closer, thinking it'd be cool if I could get as close as possible to a wild deer. But as I gained some perspective on this creature, as the tree moved from my view, I realized that this was nothing natural. This was no ordinary animal. What I was seeing looked to be something standing on 2 legs, with a deer's head at the top, but the whole thing was all skin, leathery black skin, and this thing wasn't listening. It just had its head tilted down, facing the forest floor, as if it was a statue. I began to reason with myself that maybe it was some crazy artwork by some stranger. But then I saw it breathe. Without chancing it, without taking another step towards it, I turned around and I ran back to camp. I was so afraid that I was staggering and tripping the whole way. When I got back, I was too afraid to tell anyone. I just wanted to go home. I didn't know if anyone would believe me, but I know what I saw. Number 9. My Skinwalker Encounter, submitted by Paul115. What I'm about to tell you happened 2 weeks ago. I was going on a trip to my grandparents' place, and that's about a 1-hour drive. The road leads through a huge forest, nearly 45 minutes of the drive there. So I left with my parents at around 6 that night, and it was almost completely dark. So through the whole drive it was going to be night, I assumed. Half an hour went by and it was pitch black outside, and only our car's headlights and the moon's light were giving any light at all. Suddenly, as I was watching through the windows, I will mention that we were going slow just to avoid any slippery turns, I saw something, and I instantly regretted looking out that window. There in the dark of the woods was a pale white, almost human-like figure, and only by the light of the moon I could make out some features on its face. Then it moved its head towards our vehicle. I saw 2 red eyes. They were like portals directly to hell. I was terrified instantly. The creature let out a high-pitched screech that I could hear from within the car, and I knew that it was coming from this creature, because as it started, its jaw widened inhumanly so. My mom and dad turned their heads trying to find the source of the noise. They heard it too. After looking at my parents to see if they heard it, I looked back at the creature. It was now no longer sunk to the ground. It was now standing on its legs and was easily about 7 feet tall. The moment my dad saw it, he decided to throw caution out the window. He floored it. Then we watched as the creature got back on all 4s, then charged into the woods, disappearing. Now this was a one-way road, and it went on straight for a few miles. But I swear the whole way, the same distance from the tree line to the road, we heard those screams over and over. Apparently this creature was somehow keeping pace with us. When we finally arrived at my grandparents' place, we all got in the house as quickly as possible, completely forgetting any luggage that we had in the vehicle. Inside, we rushed through salutations, and we locked the door. And then we heard the screaming around the house. My grandparents' expressions were different than that of my parents, and instantly we all knew that my grandparents recognized this sound. The next few hours went by as we all sat in the living room, cuddled up together, and my dad and grandfather both had 12-gauge shotguns at the ready. After a long while, I somehow finally fell asleep. That night, though, I kept waking up in the middle of the night, over and over, every so often. But every time I did, I would look out the window, and there would be red eyes in different windows. Whatever was out there, it was moving from window to window, keeping a close eye on us. Or maybe it was trying to find an entrance. When everyone was awake in the morning, everything seemed to go back to normal, and during our little getaway, we didn't hear anything or see anything else like that creature. I couldn't have been more thankful. To this day, I don't know what it was, but one fact remains. My grandparents know something, but they refuse to give any answers. And number 10, Until Dawn, submitted by X-Seraphim-X. My family and I were going to a family reunion on my uncle's ranch or farm. Every 5 years we would have the reunion, and every time I would awkwardly follow my parents around and stuff, talking to cousins that I've never met before. Anyway, some of the grown-ups decided it was a good idea to stay and spend the night, drinking. My parents decided to stay too, and I don't know what possessed them to put me in charge of the toddlers and teenagers, but those kids were like half my age, and 2 of them were older than me. I wasn't really up to it. Somehow we ended up sleeping outside in tents that were in a row, overlooking the thick bushes and trees outside. It was about 1 in the morning when all of us finally went to sleep, because last I checked all the phone lights were off. I woke up listening to eerie howls of pain coming from behind one of the tents. Now howls like this were normal, because there were a lot of coyotes on my uncle's ranch, but they wouldn't come this close to humans. I ended up listening to the howl. It slowly died off. I woke up again later, listening to the sound of odd ripping noises to the left. I got up and peeked my head outside of the tent, and what I saw shook me to my very soul. It looked like a deer on its hind legs, until I took a second glance. There, looming over a tent only a few feet away from me, was a tall and gray creature with dangling arms and horns on its head. It was just peering into a hole it made on the top of a tent. I wanted to scream and do something, but I was paralyzed with fear as this thing put half its head into the tent hole. I never realized that my cousin was up and looking at this thing until she threw a small pebble at it. I pushed her back inside and closed the tent we were huddled in. We sat there listening and waiting for it to do something. We could hear it out there sniffing the tent, and we could still see its tall shadow. It was just circling the tent for a while until we heard another howl off in the distance. Finally, this weird creature scattered away like it never happened. We stayed up until dawn, and I was too tired and scared to go tell our parents what happened. The last thing I was about to do was exit that tent. In the morning, some tents were ripped, and there was what appeared to be drool on some of the tents. I never got around to telling my parents what I experienced. I don't know why I still haven't. I really haven't bothered to share this story with many people. Maybe I'm still scared deep down. Skinwalkers are some of the scariest beings I've ever read about. These creatures are both ravenous and intelligent. Most creatures that show up on my channel are just that, animals. But skinwalkers are different. They know what they're doing, what they want. They'll try to trick you, try to lure you in any way possible, to that quiet spot in the middle of the woods. Just remember, if you step even 1 foot toward that noise, you won't be coming back. In fact, no other living soul will probably ever see you again. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send us your deep web horror story soon at deathbyfear.com. Also, stay tuned next Friday at 5 p.m. Central for the next live stream. Thanks. Skinwalkers are horrible things, entities that tear the flesh from others to wear as a disguise for the hunt. Number 1. The Monster in Northern Canada. Submitted by Ryan. I'm a 17-year-old guy that lives in northern Minnesota back in the States. I consider myself muscular. I weigh around 200 pounds and I go to the gym every morning. I'm not too prideful to admit that I might be pretty cocky sometimes, but I'm not easily scared. Anyway, every summer, my friend and I drive up to Bishoe Lake in Alberta. We usually go fishing in our little boat, and that's what we were doing that day. We just got done fishing, and we were driving our fishing boat back to the cabin. My friend Zach stops the boat all of a sudden and starts clenching his ears. It's obvious, and I look over at him and ask, "Hey, you okay, man?" He responds with, "What on earth was that noise? Tell me you heard that." Confused, I answered, while looking around at the surrounding lake. "No, what did it sound like?" He looks around for about 10 seconds, then responds, "It was this super high-pitched howl. It sounded like it was right next to me, but now it's gone." So he starts the boat back up, and we drive back to the cabin undisturbed. A few hours later, we are playing the new Call of Duty together in the living room when something that sounded like a rock hit our window. We both jump up, and Zach yells, "What was that?" Then he goes to check it out. I'm sitting on the couch and I tell him, "It's probably just some bird, man, just finish the game with me." So he walks away from the window and just sits down, and we start playing again. By then it's about 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and we're still playing our game, when out of nowhere, we hear this god-awful high-pitched howl. And almost instantly, as goosebumps envelop my skin, I realize this must have been the sound he was talking about. The sound blares from just outside our cabin. Zach screams, "That was the noise!" as we both run to the window and look outside to find nothing. Then Zach, who is fed up with whatever this prankster is doing, grabs a kitchen knife and runs out the front door, yelling, "Whoever's out there, come here and show yourself, this isn't funny." I get up and run outside with him looking around. I wanted to be sure he didn't hurt someone in his anger. The next thing we saw is something I never thought I'd witness in my life, and I honestly can't believe I'm saying it now, because it sounds like I'm an escaped patient from a mental hospital. But I know what I saw, and it will forever haunt me. There's an elk standing at the forest's edge outside, and we watch in silence and in awe as the elk stands up on its hind legs, letting out that same horrific high-pitched howl, the exact noise we had just heard. Right away, we both make a beeline for the truck. It was parked in the driveway to our right, and Zach hops in the passenger seat. I jump into the driver's seat and dig around in my pocket for the keys. First things first, I lock all the doors. I finally find the keys and shove them into the ignition. I pound my foot on the gas, zipping down the driveway and turning down the dirt road to zoom away. Once we have the guts to, Zach and I both look back at the cabin and see that that thing is gone. Then we look at each other, speechless. To this day, I think what we saw was a skinwalker, a shaman or spirit that can take the form of animals, but not perfectly. I've heard the legends before, and I honestly never put an ounce of truth into them, but this experience, it's confirmed so much for me. But I'm still terrified, and I know I wasn't hallucinating, because Zach and I both saw it. To all of you listening or reading, just know there are things out there, and it doesn't always have to make sense. Number 2. Skinwalker or Doppelganger. Submitted by Caden. This happened early in November of last year. My friend and his parents decided to go up to the mountain for the weekend, and they invited me to go with them. So I agreed, and I went with them after school on Friday. It was about a 3-hour drive up the mountain to Kevin's dad's cabin. I'd never been there before, and I was honestly pretty excited. We pulled up to the cabin, and I was taken aback by the size of it. It had a large 2-door entrance with a huge glass window that stood above it. This cabin was basically a mansion. Anyway, Kevin and I went in, and we were looking for a room. We decided to pick one that was equipped with a large flat-screen TV and some comfy chairs. The room also had 2 queen-sized beds. It was hard to believe that this place was real, at least for me anyway. We got settled in the room, and we began to play some GTA. We played games and hung out for a while. When we got bored, we decided to go out and just walk around for a little bit, exploring the wilderness. Now, the cabin, of course, was completely surrounded by woods on all sides, and the last people we saw were miles away. So we were just walking around for a while, staying just where the light from the house still hit us. We were just out there messing around and telling jokes and stories. Soon we decided to go back into the cabin to grab some snacks and drinks and things like that. I grabbed a Pepsi and a Snickers, then we headed back out to the woods to look around. I was waiting for Kevin while he was talking to his parents about something. So I got on my phone and checked the time, and of course out there I had no service. I turned on my flashlight, and immediately I saw a trail in front of me and decided to follow it. I got deeper into the woods, and it grew quieter and quieter the further I got. I think I was walking for about 15 minutes, when to my left, I heard something moving around. something my size at the very least. I shone my light in its direction, and as I did, I saw a man standing there in the weirdest position. "Whoa, you scared me. What are you doing?" I asked the man, and he repeated what I said, exactly how I had said it, as if he was replaying a recording of my voice. "What are you doing?" I squinted at him, looking at his face, and what I saw next terrified me. As I looked at him, his face glitched. It's the best way I can describe it. His face glitches into my features. I took a step back and whispered, "What the hell?" Only to watch this thing take a step closer to me and repeat what I just whispered. "What the hell?" I stood there paralyzed with fear, looking back at this inhuman thing. Whenever I blinked, the thing would blink too right after me. It was mimicking almost everything I did. I lifted my arm and waved at him with my Pepsi bottle. And still, he did the same thing, but his movements were delayed and jerky. I put my arm down, but this time, I took a step towards him. But the thing instantly turned around and darted back into the woods. But then it stopped, about 10 feet out. It looked back at me with my face. It stared at me for about 2 seconds. Then it turned again and ran into the woods. I was left there, chilled to the bone, my heart pounding out of my chest. I have no earthly idea what that thing was, but it seemed like it was trying to learn how to be me. Its voice was the same as mine, just like it had recorded me or something. I didn't know how to feel about the situation, but when I got back to the cabin and told Kevin what I saw, he just laughed at me. But it was real. It was very, very real. Number 3. The Thing from the Woods. Submitted by Philip S. This took place about 4 years ago, right at the beginning of the biggest snowstorm of my life. It was February, and in my home state of Massachusetts, we're no strangers to snow. At this point, there was already a good foot of snow on the ground from previous storms. Right before the storm started, I figured I should dig up some of the snow outside, as some of it had collected in my chicken run. It was early morning, and as I was getting ready to go out, I noticed that the motion sensor light had gone off next to the chicken coop. I looked around the yard from my window, but I didn't see a thing. As I went to the door, my cat Alfred got in front of the door and was looking at me. He was strictly an indoor cat, so it wasn't like he was asking to go outside. I gently moved him aside with my foot, but he got right back in front of the door in my way. He was trying to say something, I just didn't know what at the time. He usually wasn't like this, so I thought it was very strange. I figured he wanted some attention, so I picked him up, setting him on a chair. I went outside onto my back deck. Now, my yard is narrow, maybe 30 feet of a strip of grass and garden that had been slowly taken over by the forest surrounding my house. At the end of my yard, there was a steep hill covered in trees. This led up to the rest of the forest. The chicken run was about 10 feet from the deck, so I went over and got to work, letting the chickens out for a bit and feeding them before starting to shovel. When I was about halfway done, one of my chickens, a Rhode Island Red named Red, started squawking. I've heard them squawk before. My 2 Buff Orpington chickens always did this before they laid an egg, but this seemed more like an alarm, and I hadn't heard this type of noise from them. Not since my dad's dogs once tried to attack them. It was a sound of panic. I was outside the run, dumping a bucket of snow into a pile. I looked up at the chickens. They were all along the back fence of the run. They were looking at something on the hill. I followed their gazes, looking up at the top of the hill, and what I saw gives me chills to this very day. There was a big black dog-like thing sitting at the top of the hill, staring down right at me. I froze in my tracks, looking right back at it. I knew the animals in my area, and the two main things that would make sense for it to be are a fisher cat or a coyote. But this thing was far bigger, and it just didn't look right. We stared at each other for a few minutes, its yellow eyes glowing in the early morning light. Then, all of a sudden, it stood up on two hind legs and turned and ran into the forest. I ran back into my house, slamming the door shut and locking it. I still don't know what that thing was, but I'm reminded of it whenever the motion sensor light goes off, or when my neighbor's dogs start barking. What really disturbs me is the fact that when it stood up, its legs were human-like. I hope I never see that thing again. Number 4. Philippine Skinwalker. Submitted by Hina2426. This story happened March 25th of 1992. I was 21 years old back then, a freshly made black belt in Taekwondo, Hapkido, and Karate. As you can tell, I'm very into martial arts, and I'm confident that I could beat someone who tries to harm me. Now, my family is a Catholic religious family, which is very common in the Philippines. I live in Nueva Ecija, which is a province in central Luzon. At the time, my sister was 26 years old and was laboring for her firstborn baby. My mother and father went to Aling Alma's house. She was the midwife of our rural area, and she lived about 9 kilometers away. I was staying in Manila at the time, but I came back for my sister. Our place is a farming area, but at the side of our house there is a mountainous region close to San Jose, and there is a village nearby. This happened while our parents were gone. My sister and I were talking, and then my sister said that she was tired and would like to take a nap. So I left her alone to do so. It was around 11 o'clock in the evening, and now I'm wondering why my parents haven't come back yet. They left about an hour ago, and it only takes 30 minutes to go and get back. I was thinking that they may have run out of gas, or their tires got flat. An hour after that, at midnight, they still hadn't come back, and I began to worry. I wanted to get out and head their direction, just to be sure they were okay. But I couldn't just leave my pregnant sleeping sister out here. She was about to give birth, so I stayed. And that may be the decision that ended up saving my niece and my sister. Around that time, I could feel the air changing around me. It felt like a storm was coming soon. Suddenly, I heard a different sound than the wind. It was more like ek 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 ek. It was so near, like just outside the windows. The sound instantly chilled me. It reminded me of the legends of the Aswang, which is similar in the Philippines to the Skinwalker. I was sitting there being paranoid for my sister, repeating the legends in my head. They say that when you can hear the Aswang, it means they are far away, but if they are near, you can no longer hear them. To get my mind off things and to feel a little better, I headed over to my sister's room and sat down in there with her. When I got in her room, she was already wide awake and sitting up. She said, "Yakun burina," which means, "It wants me." What was she saying? Was she scared that it was the Aswang too? We were too old for this story, too old to believe something like this. But I was scared enough to go to the kitchen to get my father's machete. I went back to my sister when we both heard the sound again. Ek, 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 ek. But it was still very far away. Then, after that, there was total silence. Our nearest neighbor was about 1 kilometer away, so I made the decision to defend my sister and my niece, even if it cost me my life. I was horrified at this point. We were alone at night, at a farmhouse, in the middle of a storm, hearing the strangest noise we had ever heard. We sat there hoping that what we were hearing was something completely explainable, and not something right out of an urban legend. I needed to stay strong for my sister. After that long silence, we then began to hear branches and trees falling, crashing in the nearby forest. Something was getting closer. I stayed close to my sister. She was shaking as she cried. I was scared too, but I swore to myself to protect her. Then the noises stopped, and there was total silence once more. I was expecting the worst, but hoping that whatever it was just gone. But all my fears were confirmed when I heard the footsteps just above us. There was something on the roof, but it was so silent, like it was trying to stalk. This house back then was a small nipa hut, or a Baha'i kubo in Tagalog. So our roof was made of a haystack. Then we heard what sounded like digging. Whatever was on the roof was clawing a hole through it. I went to where the noise was coming from and stood just below it, wielding the machete. Then I saw the hole. It grew wider and wider, until I could saw what were red, furious eyes peeking through. That's when I knew the stories we were told were completely true. I glanced at my sister, knowing that this was it. I would die trying to protect them, but I wouldn't be enough to stop it. Then our parents finally came rushing in. My father went to his hidden vault beneath our papag, or bamboo bed. He grabbed an old rifle. He ran over to me under the hole and fired 2 rounds into the roof. He went outside and chased after the thing, but there was nothing found. When he got outside, all he could see was the farm and the forest. My sister soon gave birth to my niece, and it was named after me. Her name was Anna, which is short for Annalisa. That day I realized something. I'm too afraid to face it, but my sister and my niece both gave me the courage to face that thing. I was ready to die for them, even though I hardly doubted that I could take on an Aswang. The other day I'd gone back to Manila, and I saw a black crow and a black dog sitting together in the street, which was odd in and of itself, but I later learned from my mother that the Aswang can take the shape of black animals. When she told me this, it sent chills down my spine. If I ever meet the Aswang again, I will be ready to fight back. And number 5, Hunting Cabin, submitted by Lucas. I'm 16 and I live in Pennsylvania, near the Appalachian Mountain Range. As a kid growing up, we would always go up to my uncle's cabin in the mountains. We'd often go hunting up there. There is a long driveway leading up to the cabin, and a big parking area with a spotlight looking down on it. It was in late November, and the night before the first day of whitetail buck season, so we had our regular get-together at the cabin. There was a lot of drinking going on, so I kind of distanced myself from all of it and went outside to take a smoke break. As I walked outside that night, I will never forget the sound that I heard. It was a mix between an animal in distress and almost a creepy laugh. I'm easily scared, and I quickly went back inside after that. Whatever it was, I didn't want to be a part of it. After a while, the other people in the cabin went to bed, and it was just me left awake. I didn't mean to be the last one awake, but I suffer from sleep insomnia, and my mind just races all night. On a good day, it takes me about 2 hours to fall asleep. I was thinking about random things, when all of a sudden, I heard the same noise I'd heard before, and it was very disturbing. I tried to distract myself from it, and frankly, the fear I felt from this noise motivated me to fall asleep so that I didn't have to witness whatever it was. When I woke up the next morning, I was ready to go for a hunt. We got done hunting, and I forgot all about that evening prior. We all sat down and had some supper. Then night came again, and once again the older people I was with were slamming beers back to back, so I just sat there and played on my phone. One of the guys went outside for a smoke break, and they didn't come back for a long time, maybe 30 minutes. So my dad told me to go check on him. As I walked outside, I saw him standing next to my dad's car, and I yelled over to him, "Hey, we were just wondering where you went off to." But then I nearly died when I heard a voice behind me say, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. I was just looking for my playing cards in the truck." I turned around to see him walking towards me. I looked back at my dad's car, and whoever was just there, the thing that had looked just like him, they were gone. I didn't want to look like an idiot in front of anyone else, so I mentioned it only to my dad. He said that I may have been just seeing a shadow of a tree or something. He's a Christian, so he flat out refuses to believe in the paranormal. So the next day, we hear a shot ring out. Apparently, my uncle has shot a deer. We all help him collect it and clean it up, then we hang it up so we can butcher it later. That evening, they all celebrate by once again drinking beer, and I was left out. It was around 4 p.m., and we were about to eat the deer my uncle had shot, when my uncle said something. He said, "That's funny. I could have sworn I put the chops over my grill to cook." But he shook it off, saying that a coyote must have grabbed them or something. So we ate our supper, and once again it was nighttime. We were all getting ready to go to bed. I couldn't sleep as usual, so I sat up and stayed on my phone for a while playing games. I forgot to mention that whenever my uncle shoots a deer, he throws all the guts and innards into a pit we call the feeding trough. There are a lot of coyotes in the area, and we figure it's a good way to give back to the wildlife. Anyway, I was laying up in bed when I heard that same noise again. It sounded far away, and I wasn't worried about going and taking a look outside to maybe try and put an image to this strange and creepy noise. Part of me wanted to get down to the bottom of this, so I looked out the front door, and there, I saw it. It was on all fours, eating some of the guts from the feeding trough. I thought at first that it was a coyote, but then the thing stood up, and it stared straight at me. I couldn't see its face, but I could see shadows coming from the top of its head, which I perceived to be horns. I didn't move a muscle, afraid it would come charging at the door if I did. It stared at the cabin for a good minute, before just vanishing. It didn't get down and trot off, it just disappeared out of sight. I stood there, both breathless and speechless. The next morning, I told my dad everything that I saw, but again, he denied it. If it was supernatural at all, he didn't believe it. Luckily, that was the last night we were staying there. Back home, I decided to Google anything that had any similarities to the creature that I saw. What makes the most sense out of what I researched would be the Skinwalker, because they say that the Skinwalker can change into the forms of animals, but he can never change completely. He'll always look off or strange, like some sort of hybrid. Perhaps that explains the coyote thing that stood on its hind legs. It still very much creeps me out to this day, and even though my uncle has sold that cabin ever since, I will never step foot in those mountains again. I'm just too scared to even look out my window at night. I pray that I never have to witness such a thing ever again. There are all kinds of creepy critters roaming the earth. Most we've seen and documented. Others are just legends some say they've witnessed. But out of all those mysterious beasts, the Skinwalker is perhaps the most terrifying. It can change shape. It can mimic voices. It will do anything to lure you out into the woods. What happens next, no one knows. It's hard to remember when you're dead. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Also, a huge shout out goes out to my newest patrons. They are Lainey Miller and Felicia Taylor. Thank you both so much for going above and beyond the call of duty. You're helping me keep these nightmares alive. It walks through the forests, searching for new skin to wear. Maybe that skin is yours. This world is a strange one. One of my favorite monsters to talk about is the Skinwalker. It's so unnatural, so demonic, so creepy. To imagine something like that in your woods so close to our homes, it would give you nightmares. It might just be a matter of time before you wake up to your window open, the full moon shining in, and a clawed hand reaching for your flesh. enjoy these allegedly real sightings of skinwalkers. But first, what is the creepiest thing you've seen in the ocean? Let me know by sending me your story at darknessprevails.org. Thank you. Now, hold on to your skin. You don't want to lose it. Number 1. It Wears People's Skin. Submitted by Darren H. I never thought I'd see something like this in my life. You won't find me back in the woods for a very long time. I was out there in the Ozarks. It was looking like another beautiful season for hunting. I'd been seeing deer everywhere. Almost hit one on the road, just trying to get to my perfect hunting spot. I'd been hunting at these parts for decades now. Sometimes I'd come here to escape. You know, life isn't always a happy thing. It was quiet that day. Cold, misty. The autumn leaves filled the forest floor to my ankles. The trees were bare as the wind blew past their nothingness. I actually enjoyed this dreariness. It was mesmerizing. It made me want to sit up against the trunk of a tree and fall asleep for a while. So when I did finally sit down below my tree stand, I never started climbing. Instead, I did just that. I laid my head against the bark, and I closed my eyes. I woke up some time later. I had no idea how long I'd been out, or what time it was, but I did know one thing. Something woke me up. A noise. It had come from deep within the woods, maybe 30 yards ahead of me. So it was close. At this point, on any normal day, I'd already be slowly and quietly readying my gun. Thoughts of deer stew for dinner this coming week warm on my mind. But I couldn't move. I couldn't move because the sound I had heard that had jolted me awake was a sound that did not belong in our plane of existence. It sounded like a large man screaming for his life, but under his voice was another, a young girl's voice, screaming in the exact same tempo. When it had finished its double scream, it simply reversed it until it was back to silence. Chills filed over my skin as I prayed that what I had just heard was simply the fading end of a dream that I'd had. But it wasn't. There was something ahead of me. A silhouette was forming and fading into appearance from the mist. I stayed quiet. I dared not move. I gritted my teeth and forced down a scream. Because when I saw the creature before me, all life and existence lost its meaning. Whatever the creature was, it hadn't seen me yet, maybe because it was too busy to notice. It was yanking on its own skin, pulling and tearing at it, until, rip, it came off. Yet underneath that skin there was fur, a thick layer of fur. Its arm no longer had skin on it. Now a hairy arm with a clawed hand reached out for the skin on its face. Its face was emotionless. It had the face of a middle-aged man, slightly overweight. That face's skin didn't seem to fit its face, as it appeared to hang partially from its head. Then its claw came up and ripped the skin from itself, throwing the face on the forest floor in disgust. Its real face was revealed. A mix between a young boy's face and a deer. That's the best way I can describe it. It looked irritated, fed up with something. As soon as it finished ripping the extra flesh from itself in front of me, it turned back the way it came and disappeared into the mist once more. Finally, I could breathe. Finally, I was free to think again. My mind seemed to have roared to life after idling for ages. Yet still, I waited there. I waited in the moist, fallen leaves that made my seat. I waited until I knew that thing was far enough away that either it couldn't hear me if I got up, or it couldn't catch up to me if I ran. I piled into my truck, goosebumps stacking on goosebumps all over my body. I almost screamed on the run there, agony and inhuman confusion filling my mind. I haven't gone back to those woods. I won't be going back into any woods for a very long time. Watch out when you're in the Ozarks. There's something out there, and it wears people's skin. Number 2. Skinwalker After Midnight. Submitted by Taylor A. I was 19 when it happened. I was fairly in the mindset that I was indestructible and fearless. Before this night, I thought I'd seen it all. But I was wrong. I live in the Stanislaus National Forest, and to most, you wouldn't ever know where it is. It's a beautiful rural town tucked away called Tuolumne. Well, my story took place on one October night. Me and my ex at the time, let's call him S for the sake of the story. He had lived here all his life, so he knew where the coolest places to explore were. We went with some friend to Round Meadows, way out in the hills. When we got there, we found an old abandoned house. He told me the place was used by drug dealers to hide and make their stuff. Well, upon inspection, there was a second floor on the inside with a wood stove and some bunk beds. This is where we would spend our night, the unknowingly frightful night ahead. After some time, we made a fire. We cooked some food for the night. Then we went outside to go walk around. Well, S and him went one direction, while I got this harebrained idea to go off in the other. I told them I needed to use the bathroom, but I really wanted to circle around and scare them. Once enough time passed, I went back to find them. Keep in mind, I've never been to this area, and as expected, I got lost pretty fast. I was soon regretting my decision. The whole meadow was lit by moonlight, but the house we were in for the night was tucked in the tree line, so the moon was no help to find the place. I followed some movement I saw in the distance, thinking it must have been my friends, but when I got closer, I saw what looked like just 2 deer. I figured I'd scream at them to goof off, and maybe even get my friends' attention. When I turned back to look at the deer to do so, one of them stood up on its hind legs. When the other deer saw this, it ran away in fear and panic. The deer that was standing on its hind legs, it looked at me with an empty gaze, and all I could muster was, "What?" And this thing looked down at me without moving its mouth, in a creepy low voice, and it repeated back to me what I had said.
What?
And for the first time since I was a child, I was afraid out of my mind, afraid of whatever this was in front of me. In the distance, I heard my friends laughing. Then I heard a gunshot. Apparently those two were playing with a gun. As soon as the gunshot rang out, the thing started after me. I screamed and turned to run in the direction of my friends, and as I did, the thing followed suit. I tried to run as fast as I could through the tall grass in the meadows, and all the while this thing was right behind me. When it got quiet, I stopped to catch my breath, and soon I saw my friends. When they looked towards me, they looked horrified. When I turned around to see what they were looking at, I saw that thing somehow silently catching up to me, and when I looked at it, I saw its mouth morph into a hole of razor-sharp teeth. When I looked at it up close, it looked nothing like a deer, rather some mix between man and beast. It had slender long arms and a barrel-like chest, but its legs were more human now. I was frozen in my step. I just couldn't move. Out of nowhere, a gunshot rang out again, and I turned to look at my friends. They yelled at me to duck, and as soon as I did, they shot again. This time they must have hit the thing, because it ran off into the woods. Still, I took off running, and so did the other two. Somehow we made it back to the abandoned house okay. The only problem was, there was no glass in the windows of the place, and the loft on the second floor had one stairwell to it, and no doors in between. As the top sounded safest, all of us ran up there. The boys stayed at the top of the staircase like guards or sentries, but I cowered in a corner, contemplating everything I'd just seen. I didn't want to make too much noise either. We all needed to stay alert. Soon we heard a loud crash. I got up and looked out the nearby window. That same thing from before. It was now climbing on the shingles of the roof. It knew where we were, exactly which room. We made a break for the stairs, but before we descended them, the creature burst its head through the open window, and it began to scan the room. We ran as fast as we could into the garage, piling into the cars. But as I opened the car door, I could hear it just above us, climbing around on the roof even still. As soon as we started those vehicles, we hightailed it out of that place. But no sooner had we started driving down the road, we saw that thing on all fours trying to catch up to us. S grabbed the gun again and shot at it, hitting the dirt next to it. But it was enough to get it off of our tails as the beast turned to its left and disappeared into the woods. Only later did I realize that we had left some of our things at the abandoned house, but I don't think any of us even cared. I'm 22 now. None of us really talk about what happened that day. I don't think anyone would believe us. Before this, I really had nothing to fear. Nothing about the darkness or the forests that I called home. But now, I was scared at every little movement, every little sound, and especially the dark. I can't even look at deer the same way since that day. I have never returned to Round Meadow since that day, and I don't think I ever will. Number 3. Weird Stories from Mexico. Submitted by Mado8154. My mother is originally from Oaxaca, Mexico, and she shared some creepy stories told by her older relatives with my older brother and me. I kinda wish the only scary thing she had to tell us was when someone she knew got chased by a cow, but no, there were worse things in store. One afternoon in the kitchen, either my brother or I had brought up the topic of Skinwalkers. My brother told me that a video game he played consisted of creatures from Navajo legends. Even though my mom's family isn't really of Navajo descent, she did tell us about how her entire family thinks that our cousin Vicky is a skinwalker that turns into a snake. She said they once found shed snake skin in the corner of her room. However, the shed skin was massive, far too big or too long to be any regular snake in the area. And why would such a big snake be left alone to stay in Vicky's room? Surely her family would have gotten rid of it, right? This piqued my interests, for I had already listened to a bunch of Skinwalker Encounters stories before. Eventually, I asked her again for more stories, more tales of the Skinwalker. She told one that's a little bit weirder. Mom explained that her uncle was driving home after 3 days of being away, probably to sell goods at the market, spending the night near his stand. While on the road home, his car had stopped moving, and when he tried to start it up again, it should have, but didn't. He wasn't out of gas, and he couldn't find a problem with the car. There wasn't anything wrong with it. I knew this already because the car would start later on in the story, but not before her uncle, through the blackness of the night, saw a group of people that had not been anywhere near there before, had suddenly appeared. These people, some were covered in fur, some had horns, others tails. They didn't make eye contact with him while crossing in front of his car, and then they just disappeared. Like I mentioned before, the car did start up again, but when he arrived home, he was immediately confronted by his family, who were frantically asking him where he'd been. My uncle, confused, said he was only gone for 3 days like everyone knew already. Every family member disagreed, saying that he'd been gone for 3 years, not 3 days. Of course, my great-uncle was shocked. No one had any explanation for why he doesn't remember 3 years of his life. No one knows where he went. Now, I'm not a religious person by any real means, but for some reason I still do believe in demons and ghosts or spirits. Whether or not the devil himself is real, or whether or not God is real, is still something I'm on the fence about. But when it comes to Skinwalkers, I'm definitely certain. I trust my mother's family 100%, even if some of their stories can be a little crazy. I really hope that none of these entities, especially the devil, try to find me after sharing this story. Number 4. Unidentified Monster. Submitted by Benjamin. Around my house in Frisco, Colorado, there was about an acre of woods. Before the cul-de-sac I lived on began to be developed, the woods were mostly lodgepole pine. I was outside during the summer, and I was around 10 years old back then. What happened that day, though, I will never forget. Anyway, I was outside, about 20 feet from the cul-de-sac, when I heard it. It was some sort of monstrous growl, or roar, a mix between the sound of a cougar and a reptile, though a good deal quieter. It was very close, and I briefly looked around to find it, but I didn't see anything. I was kind of creeped out, so I returned to my house, pretty much happy that I didn't find the source of this weird noise. I don't know if it followed me. It may be possible, because I'm not a quiet person. The next few summers passed without incident, and we decided, because of various reasons, including rising house prices and my sister's altitude sickness, to move north. My first year in Montana was my 6th grade year. At the time, my family rented a house. In front of the house was a pair of deciduous trees, but I don't know what type. One night, I was looking out the window in the front of the house. I enjoy watching out the windows, but this time I saw something that scared me. Outside, I saw what appeared to be a large, pale, lanky man squatting in the tree. It was staring into the window of my sister's room down the hall. It was summer, so it definitely wasn't a pile of snow on the tree. The tree had all its leaves, so it couldn't have been exposed branches. One absolutely extraordinary thing, though, was that its knees were splayed wide, like it was preparing to jump. I could see its arms, but I couldn't see their ends or even the elbows. The moon was covered by clouds, as is common here, so I couldn't see the thing very well. I turned to look away, to turn off my lamp, when I heard a thump. The house was a duplex, so it couldn't have been the couple next door. It sounded far closer. I looked out the window, and the creature was gone. But now there was a deer outside that hadn't been there before. It was looking at me, standing next to the woods that extended back up into the mountains. I know elk, I know mule deer and whitetail deer, and I know bears live up there. But deer and elk don't climb trees, and bears are covered in fur and they're thick. I don't know what it was that I saw. I believe the final part of the story could be related to these incidents. I work for the Montana Conservation Corps in the summer. During my first summer, my crew was working up in Glacier National Park during the second week. We were repairing the fence by the mini glacier entrance. As we settled down for the night, first the crew leaders went to bed, then the rest of us. I stayed up writing. We were staying in the Cut Bank campground in the east side, as the locals call it. When I finally went to bed myself, during the night I was awakened. I thought I heard the sound of splashing through the creek. The creek does have some mini rapids, but what really scared me was when I went to the outhouse. It sounded like someone knocked on the door after trying the handle a couple of times. After a minute, I opened the door onto a cloudless night, and I saw something off in the distance in the fields that were nearby. The second sighting was up at Slide Lake, about a mile from the Canadian border. The hike in was treacherous. We were there to survey pika, which are related to rabbits, but look like marmots. So Slide Lake is way up there. We busted in during the first day, and I'm not interested in going up there again because of what happened. The night we were up there, it was rainy. There was a dry creek bed that was, as expected, dry. The only thing it was wet with was dirt. It was 2 feet deep with loose soil. However, the focus is not the creek. I just like to play in the dirt. The creek bed ditch was crossed by a small wooden bridge. During the first night, I woke up and had to use the restroom. The problem was, something was on the bridge, making it creak. Now, whenever something's on the bridge and is walking, it goes bump every step. The bridge occasionally creaks when you're on it. I didn't want to go outside with something creaking on the bridge like that. The creaking lasted for a good 10 to 20 minutes before suddenly stopping, and after a while the creaking stopped, and I really had to go to the bathroom. I got out and took a much-needed bathroom break at the pit toilet. More recently, there was an incident at the Hay Creek section of the Pacific Northwest Trail. This was my second and most recent season. The area we were staying at was bordered on one side by a steep drop in the valley. The other side was the side of a mountain. This was not very likely related to the others, but sometimes animals travel great distances. Anyway, I was up going to the bathroom again, and I suddenly heard a branch break over one of the tents, and of course I looked. There was nothing. I went back to going where I was going when I heard the same sound again. This time in front of me and a little to my right. It was coming from across the road, down towards the valley. The place we were staying was a dirt road, and there were bears. But bears can't cross a road without making footstep noises. They're heavy creatures. Plus, I hadn't seen a bear since we got there. I went to the bathroom, and then I heard what scared me the most. The branches all around me began to break and rustle, like something was climbing from tree to tree, but doing it in a way to make itself known. Who in their right mind would climb a 50-foot ponderosa or lodgepole in the middle of the night? I looked around me, but again I saw nothing, which, considering it was quite dark and I had no light, it wasn't surprising. And finally, there's one last incident. It was approaching evening one day. I was outside doing various banging. I was making a lot of noise as I was hammering nails in. However, after one of the nails was in, I heard what you could call a reply. 3 sounds like knocking, perhaps some small giant banging 2 trees together, coming from the hills. Every time I hammered a nail, the sound would echo in reply. Something was out there close enough to hear me doing this, and it was mimicking the sound. To this day, I'm not sure if it's one thing that's been following me, something trying to haunt me and torture me, or if these were all separate incidences. But I do know these experiences are very terrifying. And number 5. Something mimics people. Submitted by Gray. As I type this story, I'm much more used to the events that I experienced those few years ago. I'm going to tell you 2 experiences of when I saw this thing I call the Skinwalker. I was 13 and I lived with my family in Utah, very close to Arizona. I love to spend time with my older brother. One day we were just playing our usual games and joking around. We both suddenly heard our other brothers and mom screaming at the top of their lungs. Worried and scared, we ran into their room. We asked what was the matter, and they said that they'd heard galloping from a horse, which didn't sound too scary to me, even though there were no horses around these parts. Naturally, we tried to calm them down. As they sat there spooked, one of my little brothers admitted that he saw the thing making the noise. He said it was running on 2 legs, and it wasn't human. My brother and I, curious, decided to go outside. As we looked around the house, our dogs formed a circle around us. They seemed much more protective than usual. They seemed more serious too, not paying much mind to us. Rather, they were watching the woods around us in no particular direction, and every so often, they would suddenly bark, making us jump, and making us wonder what they had barked at. Eventually, the dogs calmed down, and they stopped barking, and we began to think that whatever was out there was finally gone. But as we walked back in the house, we were confronted by our grandmother and asked if we were calling them into the woods in the opposite direction that we actually were. This freaked us out. We were on the other side of the house completely, and we hadn't said a word since we stepped out the door. Whatever my grandma heard calling them, it wasn't us. This was the first time I ever saw my brother visibly shaken by something. About 2 months after this, our aunt moved into a trailer near us, maybe 40 yards away. I was home alone since my aunt's family and my family went picking for peaches, so I was lying on the couch in a living room next to a window, when suddenly I was filled with dread. Then the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I dismissed the feeling as best I could and tried to continue to watch TV. But then I heard my aunt's voice. It was like she was right next to me. I jumped up and looked out the window, but her car was still gone, and my aunt was nowhere to be seen. Something continued to speak, trying its best to sound like my aunt.
Come help me. Please, come outside.
Then I did something stupid. I grabbed a knife and a flashlight, and I walked outside. As soon as I did, the dogs once more formed a circle around me, and they were beginning to bark at what I saw was a shadow. The thing was a bulking figure. It towered over me. This wasn't some person, and I could feel the thing watching me. As soon as I saw it, I ran back in my house and locked all the doors, calling my aunt. She said she was about 5 minutes away, and my mom would be back later. I looked out my window, and I saw one dog sitting in front of the door. As I scanned the area outside, the dogs seemed to be protecting the entire house. They were pacing back and forth, watching the shadow in the distance. To this day, I can only believe that I'm still alive because those loyal dogs kept the shadowy thing at bay. To all of you who stay home alone sometimes, if you ever hear a disembodied voice of someone you know or love, don't listen to it. It's luring you into some sort of trap. The Skinwalker is a fearsome beast, something you definitely don't want to run into at night. But what does it want? What does it do with your skin after it tears it off of you? Maybe it disguises itself as you in order to seek new skin. Maybe when it's done with your old skin, it devours what is left. So, who knows what the Skinwalker truly looks like? And let's hope we never find out. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send me your creepy stories from the ocean at darknessprevails.org. Also, a huge thanks goes out to all my newest patrons. They are Lisa Red, Mila Gray, and Sage Bentley. Thank you all so much for going above and beyond the call of duty to help my channel. All of my patrons, as well as everyone watching this, you're keeping horror alive, and Lord knows YouTube doesn't want horror on its platform. Anyway, as always, stay safe out there, and stay creepy.